Oikawa Yu, a 22-year-old, considered himself a lethargic shut-in, certain he would die a virgin. He knew that if he never ventured outside, he would never have a chance to change his fate, yet he simply could not bring himself to leave his apartment. This was because the world outside had transformed into a horrifying landscape, overrun by shambling, grotesque figures. His inaction had cost him dearly. By staying inside, he had missed his chance to escape. News reports, once trivial, now detailed a possible bacterial outbreak, warning citizens not to go outside under any circumstances, confirming that Japan was now overrun by zombies. He had merely wanted to escape reality for a while, a decision that now seemed catastrophic. He remained in his apartment, having stocked up on food online with the intention of being a permanent shut-in, thinking someone else would handle the crisis. Now, with everyone evacuated, he was left behind, realizing there was nothing else he could do. Meanwhile, outside, a determined young woman fought fiercely against the horde of infected, her pistol blazing. She moved with a desperate urgency, fending off multiple attackers. She fought with a fierce resolve, declaring that she could not die yet, clinging to a faint hope that if a certain light was real, she might still have a chance. Back in his apartment, Oikawa watched the chaos unfold, lamenting his own mistakes and realizing he had truly screwed up. He reflected on his predicament, realizing that if he were to die now, his last act would have been a particularly embarrassing one, having just finished a session focused on an old man's posterior. Suddenly, a sound echoed from deeper within his apartment, startling him. He scrambled up, his eyes wide with fear, wondering if a zombie had somehow made its way inside. He was startled by a sudden, violent banging against his door, the sound echoing through his apartment. He recoiled in terror, his mind racing with the horrifying thought of dying, especially if his final sight was something so ignominious. Suddenly, a voice from outside demanded he open the door, asserting that someone was inside. The female survivor, her pistol raised, cursed the lack of time and the need for a foolproof solution, while he remained frozen in a state of panic. As he opened the door, he was met with the chaotic sight of the female survivor battling a zombie, which lunged towards them both. He cried out in alarm, realizing a person was at his door, and quickly moved to fully open it. She fired her pistol, the shot striking the zombie and splattering blood. The creature collapsed, and she stumbled backward into his apartment, falling to the floor in exhaustion. As she recovered, she immediately complained about his hand and the lingering smell, questioning his recent activities. He, still reeling from the encounter, could only offer a mumbled explanation about needing to use the toilet. She then admonished him, stating she never imagined he would be engaging in such activities at a time like this, and sharply questioned if he even knew what was happening outside. Despite his confusion, she insisted on washing her hands, declaring that regardless of the circumstances, his act of opening the door was a positive outcome for which she was immensely grateful. With a confident smile, she introduced herself as Aishu Sunny, a beautiful genius girl and the youngest chemist, inviting him to call her Genius Sunny. He, however, pointed out her muddy shoes inside his apartment, to which she retorted that she needed to be ready to escape quickly from the swarming zombies outside. She proudly presented a briefcase filled with vials, proclaiming she had created the anti-zombie vaccine. However, she quickly added that its chance of working was around 0%, perhaps 1% at best, leaving him stunned and questioning if the pandemic would ever end. Having settled into Oikawa's apartment, Aishu Sunny relaxed, a small smile gracing her lips as she felt a sense of calm return. Oikawa, however, remained perplexed, questioning how she had managed to find her way to his secluded residence. She began to recount her story, explaining that deep within the mountains, far from any known civilization, there existed a secret laboratory. This facility was so remote that it was only accessible by helicopter, a place no one outside their operation knew about. Within those hidden walls, a team of scientists, including herself, had foreseen the impending zombie outbreak. They had begun working tirelessly on a vaccine in advance, racing against a future they knew was coming. Then, a moment of triumph arrived. She vividly recalled her elation, exclaiming her genius as the very first vial of the vaccine was finally completed. It was a crucial breakthrough, achieved at the most critical moment imaginable. However, their victory was short-lived. A chilling turn of events unfolded when one of their own, a colleague within the lab, became infected. From that moment, an uncontrollable panic erupted. The infected individual screamed in agony as the transformation began, and she watched in horror as chaos consumed the once orderly laboratory. Amidst the escalating pandemonium, the finished vial of vaccine was entrusted to her. She clutched the briefcase containing their only hope, even as grotesque, decaying hands reached out from the encroaching horde of zombies. She fled the collapsing facility, escaping the grasping hands and the overwhelming tide of the infected, leaving the secret mountain lab behind. From there, she desperately made her way down the mountain, armed with a pistol, navigating treacherous terrain. She never imagined it would take a grueling full week to finally reach civilization again. She concluded her harrowing tale, explaining that after her arduous journey, when she saw the light leaking from Oikawa's window, she believed she had found someone safe. In her exhaustion and desperation, she had let her guard down. She stands confidently, a pistol held ready, as a grotesque zombie lunges from behind, its decaying form a stark contrast to her calm demeanor. Despite her earlier composure, a grim realization washes over her as she looks down at her arm, where a torn sleeve reveals a fresh, painful bite mark. She acknowledges her mistake. She then openly displays her heavily scarred, bitten arm, confirming that she was indeed bitten there and will soon succumb to the infection, transforming into a zombie herself. Oikawa expresses his horror at the thought of such an infection, but she, holding a large, thick syringe, explains that while she has been experiencing strange peripheral visions, she remains lucid. She declares her intention to inject the vaccine into him while she still possesses her sanity, noting the unusual thickness of the needle. He immediately questions her decision, asking why she isn't taking the vaccine herself, suggesting it would be useless if she didn't. She counters, explaining that if she were to make a mistake with the vaccine, it could spell the end of everything, implying a critical, singular purpose for its use. The scene shifts to a row of body bags, as her voice clarifies that her next question is not meant to be discriminatory and requires an honest answer. She then directly asks Oikawa if he is gay and if he can be aroused by real girls, leaving him utterly shocked and bewildered by the unexpected inquiry. With a triumphant laugh, she declares that they are all set and begins to unbutton her lab coat, revealing a lace bra underneath. Oikawa, still flustered, attempts to understand the serious nature of her question, admitting that he is normally attracted to women. As she continues to undress, Oikawa reacts with a surprised exclamation, still confused by her actions. She, meanwhile, internally notes her satisfaction with having chosen a front hook bra. Without further explanation, she positioned a large syringe near his groin. With a determined look, she declared, "Ready, set, and go," before plunging the needle in. A sharp cry of pain escaped him as he writhed on the ground, clutching his groin. She looked down, offering a quick apology, explaining that if she had more time, she would have chosen his arm or leg, but for immediate effect, this was the only option. Outside, the distant, guttural cries of a zombie echoed, a stark reminder of their dire situation. Still recovering from the shock and pain, he was pulled to his feet by her. He declared that he would not be fooled again, but she simply told him not to say that, adding that after this, he could do whatever he wanted. Moments later, she was straddling him on a bed or couch, pulling her shirt over her head. He stared up in disbelief, uttering a surprised "hey," as she reassured him that it was truly okay. Now fully exposed from the waist up, she revealed clear bite marks and rapidly spreading, dark veins across her arm and shoulder, undeniable signs of her own infection. She explained that she didn't have time to remove her bottom clothes. She continued to struggle, her infected arm visible as she tried to push Oikawa away. He cried out, surprised by her sudden movement. Her struggle intensified, her body writhing as the infection spread further across her skin. She pleaded for him to wait, her voice strained with desperation. She continued to scream, clutching him tightly as he winced from the pain of her grip. He wondered if he was truly not going to turn into a zombie, but then considered that being eaten alive might be even worse. His gaze fell upon her worn-out sneakers, a small detail amidst the chaos, as she continued to cling to him, her voice a desperate plea. Meanwhile, a different memory surfaced in her mind, a time when she had walked for a week through a remote mountain, only accessible by helicopter, pondering how she survived without food or water at night. She recalled sitting alone in the desolate forest, convinced she must have been incredibly lonely, despite having friends at the research lab. Her journey continued, walking until her shoes were completely worn out, until she finally found a glimmer of hope, even as a zombie lurched towards her. Back in the present, Oikawa realized the immense burden placed upon him. He desperately thought to himself that he did not want to die, that this was too much, especially considering his recent, mundane activities. He watched as Aishu Sunny writhed in agony, her body contorting from the infection. He had managed to break free and run, but in his haste, he had inadvertently blocked their only exit. She cried out that the pain was immense, fearing she would die. Faced with her worsening condition and the blocked exit, he realized he had no other choice but to believe her desperate theory. If he failed to cure her zombification, he would surely be eaten alive. Yet, as he looked at her, a moment of doubt crept in, questioning if he was truly about to attempt something so absurd. Despite his internal conflict, he moved to act, his face contorted in a mix of desperation and fear. He pleaded with her to at least finish explaining the process, questioning if he was truly going to lose his virginity, believing in such a ridiculous cure. He needed to be certain. He could cure her with his own body, right? He held her hand, his own expression a mix of discomfort and concern, as he internally wrestled with the situation. He felt like a villain, witnessing her contorted face, a grotesque blend of agony and ecstasy, and silently pleaded for her to stop making such an expression, even in her zombified state. The experience began to transform him, shifting his demeanor from one of initial distress and reluctance to a more primal, almost savage intensity. His expressions morphed from a pained grimace to a wide, uninhibited grin, reflecting the raw, overwhelming nature of the act. He held her close, feeling her shiver. Aishu Sunny, tears streaming down her face, whispered that she was alive. He thought to himself that she felt so cold, and he wished to hold her just a little longer, like this. Moments later, Aishu Sunny smiled, her eyes closed in relief, now fully recovered from her zombified state. As she looked at him with concern, Aishu Sunny asked if he remembered anything from his time as a zombie. He, huddled and burdened by guilt, told her she could do whatever she wanted and did not have to feel responsible for anything that transpired. She then sat on the couch, explaining that what she had given him was a Z mutation inactive vaccine. More importantly, she needed to elaborate on the matter of memories. He pulled back his shirt, noticing his wound had completely healed. Aishu Sunny continued, clarifying that when injected into a healthy human, the vaccine takes effect by absorbing body fluids through mucous membranes. That person then becomes a carrier of the anti-zombie vaccine in their body. Furthermore, when this vaccine carrier comes into contact with multiple samples of zombified people. Eventually, a treatment effective against all zombies will be completed. Aishu Sunny pointed at him, her expression serious, stating that she had forced him to use it and apologized for dragging him into this. She revealed they had run out of time and had used their only vaccine on him. He stared ahead, his eyes wide with horror, as the full implication dawned on him. He would have to perform medical procedures on zombies all over Japan. A young woman, having just finished bathing, expressed relief that the gas and water were still functioning in their current desolate circumstances. Moments later, as she emerged wrapped in a towel, she confronted the young man, asking if he had peeked. He seemed flustered, but she quickly dismissed his reaction, stating that once one had seen, being naked was no longer a big deal, and that his virgin-like reaction was unnecessary. Drying her hair, she then shifted the conversation, asking what their next course of action would be. He, still somewhat embarrassed, suggested they drop the topic for now. As they stood, a faint sound caught her attention. She quickly identified the source, a package of instant noodles, a rare and welcome find in their current predicament. Soon, they were both eating, the young woman savoring her meal. The young man, however, was clearly ravenous, his stomach rumbling loudly as he quickly prepared his own noodles, asking if it was acceptable to eat so fast. She continued to eat, tears streaming down her face as she sniffled, declaring the noodles delicious, even as she shivered slightly. He watched her, his expression unreadable, as she finished the last of their food. With the meal concluded, she pointed decisively at a map of Japan, indicating a route to Tokyo. She then turned to him, declaring that he, as the holder of the vaccine, must accompany her. She explained her reasoning. Tokyo housed the main factory of a pharmaceutical company that had secretly researched the vaccine. There, they should be able to refine the vaccine within his body into a usable medicine. She then delivered a grim revelation, holding up a sign displaying the number 0. Their chance of survival after a week was precisely that, 0. He, stunned, could only ask if creating that medicine would truly end the pandemic. He listened as she explained their immediate need to secure food. He admitted he had been shut in for a month, unaware of the outside situation, and had just consumed their last remaining provisions. Following her assessment, he began to check the other rooms in the building. All of them were locked. She, however, had a more direct approach. With a confident smile, she declared she would simply use a window to enter one of the rooms, while he could unlock the door from the inside. He reacted with alarm, urging her not to be so reckless. Ignoring his concern, she swiftly entered the room through the window, calling out a cheerful welcome home. He followed, reminding her that this was someone else's residence, and instructed her to search thoroughly for food, drinks, and anything useful. Inside, they began their search. He found some good shoes and decided to change into them, also discovering a toy bat he initially mistook for a real weapon. She, meanwhile, found nothing in room 303, and in room 304, discovered an empty fridge, though she did manage to find some canned food and energy drinks. As they continued, he realized they were approaching the last room on the floor, recalling that someone lived there. Suddenly, a woman lunged from the room, screaming obscenities and attacking him with a furious kick to the face, demanding he never show his face again or she would kill him. Stunned by the sudden assault, he stumbled back, while the woman continued to shout insults, telling him to go home. He could only mutter in fear, wondering what she meant by her strange accusations. The blonde woman, now slumped against the wall, began to sniffle. He cautiously asked if she was all right, realizing with a start that she was crying. She quickly composed herself, her expression hardening. She snapped at him, asking what he was looking at, and declared that she was fine and would go home, her face still contorted in a mix of anger and distress. As she stood up, he gasped in horror, covering his mouth. The female survivor, who had just arrived, also looked on in confusion. The blonde woman's legs were covered in dark, branching veins, a clear sign of the infection. She, oblivious to their shock, simply asked if they knew her, explaining she hadn't been able to get to the convenience store. He observed the blonde woman's leg, noting the distinct bite marks on her calf, surrounded by the dark, branching veins that signified her infection. His companion pointed out the marks, explaining that this person had been bitten on the leg outside, and it was just a guess, but the infection had spread rapidly. The blonde woman, now bound, recalled the desperate moments before her transformation. She had hurriedly taken off her pants to check the wound, realizing her fate and taking matters into her own hands. But before dying, a faint twitch had seized her. As the blonde woman struggled against her bonds, his companion explained that the woman had become a zombie, or something similar, her movements now erratic and aggressive. He listened intently, absorbing the information, and then his companion, holding a ball of yarn, declared she had a great idea, asking him what they should do with the infected woman. With surprising efficiency, she had already secured the blonde woman's head, making it easy to bind her completely. The infected woman cried out in distress as her movements were fully restricted. His companion, observing the scene, remarked that the movements of the infected were simple, making them easy to catch, then playfully accused him of lacking human empathy. He recoiled, protesting vehemently that they could still save her, but his companion questioned the morality of tying up someone already unable to move, only to then deal a finishing blow. She then pointed to the blonde woman's leg, urging him to look closely at the bite mark, which was still fresh. She insisted that the woman had only been a zombie for a few days. He watched as his companion patted the blonde woman's head, then turned to him, repeating her assertion that they could still save her. He, still bewildered, could only ask how. His companion leaned in close, whispering a single, shocking word: sex. He stared in disbelief, while his companion, pointing at the screaming, infected woman, asked if a zombie face wouldn't give him an erection. He stood slumped, acknowledging that, yes, that was probably right. He worked quickly, attempting to loosen the tight, not binding the blonde woman's hands, a task proving more difficult than anticipated. Just then, the door opened, and the other young woman entered, announcing her arrival. She immediately urged him to block the door with a barricade, but he, still focused on the struggling blonde woman, asked if that could wait. The blonde woman, meanwhile, continued to writhe and groan. Their commotion had drawn unwanted attention. Suddenly, the door burst inward, revealing a horde of zombies. The young woman cried out, realizing the creatures from downstairs had begun to gather and breach their defenses. The survivors watched in horror as the zombies poured in, questioning how a supposedly metal door could be so easily broken. The young woman, clinging to him, asked how many there were, and he estimated about 4. He warned her that zombies, though slow, possessed insane strength due to the absence of their brain limiters, making a direct confrontation with so many impossible. One of the creatures lunged, its decaying hand reaching for them. As the zombies continued to breach the door, the blonde woman, now fully untied, thrashed violently, her eyes wide with aggression. The young woman, surprised by this turn of events, asked if he hadn't cured her. He responded curtly, stating he had already performed the procedure. The blonde woman, still in a frenzied state, lunged at the young woman, knocking her to the ground. He tried to intervene, but she was too strong, her movements wild and uncoordinated. He felt his head spinning from the chaos. Suddenly, the blonde woman's aggression faded, replaced by a look of confusion. She clutched her head, demanding an explanation, believing she had died and become a zombie. She then noticed the actual zombies breaking in and angrily questioned why they were in her house. As the blonde woman regained her full senses, she turned to the young man, a look of dawning realization on her face. She accused him of being a man and declared she would definitely kill him later, demanding to know why he had done what he did. The young woman, observing the blonde woman's sudden burst of strength, wondered aloud about the force she had just displayed. She mused that while the blonde woman looked tough, she didn't appear muscular enough to possess such power, questioning the nature of her abilities. The male survivor struggled against the relentless horde of zombies, their numbers overwhelming. He realized the blonde woman's earlier strength was akin to theirs, a brutal force. Meanwhile, the blonde woman, demonstrating that very same unnatural strength, began to move a heavy piece of furniture, tearing it from the wall. The female survivor, shocked by her actions, questioned what she was doing, warning her she couldn't lift it alone, but the blonde woman simply ordered her to move aside. With a guttural grunt, she hoisted the massive cabinet high above her head, revealing the male and female survivors below. The female survivor, witnessing this display, recalled that zombies possessed such strength because their brain limiters had been removed. The blonde woman, however, was rational, and she angrily accused the male survivor of biting her, demanding to know if she had been a zombie until just moments ago. The heavy furniture crashed down, crushing several of the encroaching zombies. The blonde woman stood over the male survivor, who lay on the floor, a chilling realization dawning upon him. She was wielding the brute force of a zombie, yet her mind remained entirely her own. Without hesitation, she delivered a powerful kick, sending another zombie hurtling through the air. The female survivor watched, concerned, as the blonde woman then turned her furious gaze upon the male survivor, who was still on the ground, and declared him her next target. A young woman with short, light hair screamed in terror as a man with dark, spiky hair held her close, shielding her. Suddenly, a blonde woman, her long hair wild and disheveled, burst through a door, her eyes wide with fury, demanding to know how they dared to do whatever they wanted with her body. The blonde woman, now on the floor, continued to rage, threatening to kill them immediately, her anger palpable as the man still held the terrified young woman. Moments later, the blonde woman lay unconscious, her fury spent. The man wondered if she would cause trouble upon waking, while the young woman, relieved, confirmed she was merely passed out. They decided to carry her to her room while they still could. With a shared effort, the man and the young woman began to lift her, the man taking her upper body and the young woman her legs, preparing to move her. As they struggled to carry the unconscious blonde woman, the young woman remarked that they looked rather suspicious, doing whatever they wanted with a knocked-out person. The man conceded, acknowledging it was too late to back out now. Later, the blonde woman, now identified as Kane Sugawara, sat eating directly from a can, declaring it no crime to be starving. The man and the young woman watched in dismay, realizing all their gathered food was gone, and the young woman questioned why a zombie would even need to eat. Kane, with a knowing look, then revealed a shocking claim. Zombies needed sexual intercourse to be cured. The man stared in disbelief, questioning her sanity, while the young woman listened, seemingly skeptical but willing to hear her out. The young woman, smiling, reminded the man that Kane was the one who had saved them. Kane, meanwhile, examined her own leg, noting a bite mark that no longer hurt, and asked if the man's bitten leg still caused him pain. As night fell, the young woman, feeling sleepy, suggested they save the details for tomorrow and rest. Kane, already lying down, confirmed the door was completely broken, leaving them with no choice but to sleep together in the same room. The man, resigned, agreed to get the futons. She peered over the makeshift barrier, a sense of unease settling over her as she quietly asserted that this was, in fact, her room. Despite her quiet protest, Kane, with a furious expression, vehemently ordered them to stay on their side, not to roll over, and to sleep facing the wall. The female survivor could only offer a meek apology. Kane then turned to the female survivor, acknowledging that she had endured a rough week. Meanwhile, the male survivor, from his position, bid them both good night. Later, as the night deepened, he lay awake in bed, unable to find sleep. He stared at his phone, which displayed a network error, his mind racing with thoughts of what they would do tomorrow and the overwhelming events of the day. Across the room, Kane also lay awake, wondering if the other two had already succumbed to sleep. She then rose from her bed and began to approach his side of the room. He noticed her movement, a sudden panic seizing him as he wondered if he had done something wrong or if she had somehow noticed his wakefulness. Kane placed a finger to her lips, shushing him, and quietly instructed him to follow her. He realized that the female survivor, Sunny, was completely exhausted and deeply asleep, oblivious to the unfolding situation. He reluctantly followed Kane out of the room, his mind filled with questions about why they were leaving in the middle of the night and a growing apprehension that she might intend to harm him. As they moved, Kane's face contorted slightly, a throbbing vein visible on her temple and a pulsing sensation emanating from her, betraying the resurgence of her zombie nature. She violently pulled the male survivor, who cried out in alarm, realizing with horror that she was transforming into a zombie once more. He stumbled, losing his footing as she continued to drag him, nearly falling completely to the ground. Both collapsed onto the floor, and he, regaining some composure, confronted her, demanding to know if she had truly cured him before. As she pinned him beneath her, her voice laced with desperation, she questioned if she was still human and pleaded with him to cure her again, dark, throbbing veins visibly spreading across her leg. With a determined, yet pained expression, she insisted they needed to act quickly, reiterating her fear of fully transforming back into a zombie. He lay on the floor, wide-eyed and shocked, asking if she was serious about engaging in sexual activity with him. She ignored his question, pulling down his pants and urging him to prepare himself without delay. Tears streamed down her face as she cried out that she absolutely did not want to become a zombie, a sentiment he echoed quietly, his own reluctance evident. He reflected internally on his unique ability to cure zombies, acknowledging that he had begun to feel a sense of purpose from it. He also grimly noted that he would be the only one to experience pleasure in the impending act. Her distress intensified, and she screamed that she was indeed turning back into a zombie, her body convulsing. He tried to calm her, calling her name and urging her to listen. With wide, desperate eyes, she confessed that she reached climax quickly and couldn't last long, adding that she had been a virgin until very recently. He stared back, utterly shocked and overwhelmed by her revelation. She internally reassured herself that the unpleasant ordeal would soon be over. As she continued her desperate attempt, she told him that if he disliked the experience, he could strike her once it concluded. He responded with a pained gasp. Her face glistened with sweat as she leaned in, while he, still distressed, coughed and muttered an apology. Blushing deeply, she turned her head away, explaining that despite the current circumstances, she was not the type of woman who engaged in casual encounters. He stared, surprised by her confession, internally questioning if her flashy look belied a pure nature, and then apologized to her. He also considered telling her to move from the uncomfortable floor. Now straddling him on the bed, she issued a series of commands. He was not to sniff her bed excessively, nor was he to look at her, as she found the situation embarrassing. She declared she would handle the rest herself. Exhausted, she collapsed onto him, admitting she could no longer move. He, in turn, wondered if it was his moment to take action. He sighed in relief, but his moment of respite was cut short when she, surprised, questioned if that was all, just a single attempt. Then, noticing the bite mark on her leg had significantly faded, she wondered aloud if she had truly been cured. She pulled him along, her voice firm as she urged him not to be a coward, guiding him into the room. Moments later, she emerged, declaring that one encounter was enough and she was returning to sleep. She looked away, a flush of embarrassment on her face, leaving him standing in the doorway, bewildered. The next morning, the other female survivor awoke with a stretch, noting the absence of the other two. Just then, Kane entered, announcing that she had gone downstairs to search for breakfast. The three gathered to eat, Kane presenting a package of ramen that had expired 2 months prior. Despite the expiration, they agreed that anything was better than nothing, and discussed adding eggs and cabbage to their meager meal. As they ate, Kane explained that her searches nearby had yielded nothing. The male survivor expressed his pessimism, doubting their ability to survive another week, while the short-haired woman tried to maintain a positive outlook, acknowledging their unchanged, dire situation. The short-haired woman then suggested they try searching the suburbs, a prospect that excited Kane. The male survivor inquired if she meant hardware and grocery stores, to which Kane eagerly agreed. He then abruptly told Kane to stop being so considerate, causing her to look at him with confusion. Without further explanation, he reached over and took some of her ramen. Kane quickly clarified that she simply didn't have another bowl and offered him some of her own, insisting he not worry. He looked surprised, noting that she had even less than he did. Despite her offer, he lay down, refusing to eat anything someone else had touched. Kane, however, insisted that it was fine and that everything was good. He eventually relented, taking a bite of the ramen and expressing surprise that it tasted normal, even delicious. Kane watched him with a knowing smile, while the short-haired woman observed the two, wondering why they were suddenly getting along so well. She exclaimed, demanding to see Kane's leg, her voice filled with a triumphant realization. The bite mark, she declared, had completely faded, just as she had suspected. Kane looked down at her leg in astonishment, while the male survivor, his face flushed with a deep blush, averted his gaze. He mumbled, questioning if something had transpired while he was asleep. then quickly corrected himself, acknowledging that something definitely had. He then hesitantly asked if he was responsible for the change. A young woman, her eyes closed in concentration, brought a piece of clothing to her nose, inhaling deeply to confirm its scent. She recoiled, a grimace of disgust spreading across her face as she realized the strong odor. Another woman's voice reminded her that she had been wearing the same clothes for a week in the mountains, making the smell inevitable. The blonde woman, offering a selection of garments from a closet, assured her it was fine to take whatever she liked, though she couldn't guarantee the size. The first woman apologized, admitting she hadn't noticed the smell while wearing the clothes. As the short-haired woman tried on a top, the blonde woman reacted with alarm, exclaiming that it was too revealing and reminiscent of an old man's harassment. The short-haired woman looked surprised by the comment. The blonde woman then held up a tattered white coat, noting its poor condition. Meanwhile, the short-haired woman, now in her underwear, struggled to find suitable attire, ultimately deciding to wear the white coat despite its flaws. She turned, now wearing the white coat over her undergarments, and declared that she couldn't bring herself to throw it away. The blonde woman, still trying to be helpful, offered several other outerwear options, but the short-haired woman politely declined, stating she would be okay. With a grateful smile, the short-haired woman thanked her companion. The blonde woman, holding a brush, then offered to clean off the dirt from the coat. A handgun lay on the ground, a stark reminder of the dangerous world outside. The short-haired woman realized the handgun was real, but noted it was out of bullets. The blonde woman, surprised, questioned if it was truly a real handgun. Just then, a young man with dark hair entered, asking if they had finished changing. The young man commented on the blonde woman's casual attire, to which she explained they were second-hand clothes. He complimented her, stating they suited her well, and addressed her as you. The short-haired woman, now fully dressed in her new outfit, declared she was ready to go. He received a compliment from Aishu Sunny, who found his name, you, quite nice. He thanked her for the kind words. His expression shifted to surprise as Kane Sugawara called him by his name, you, questioning if she was serious. Aishu Sunny, meanwhile, let out a nervous laugh. Aishu Sunny then profusely apologized to him, explaining that she hadn't been uninterested in learning his name, but things had simply been too hectic. Kane Sugawara, however, remarked that it was a bit off-putting to ask someone to save the world without even bothering to learn their name. Aishu Sunny continued to apologize, her face contorted in distress, while Kane Sugawara calmly told her not to get angry, as it wasn't done on purpose. He stood silently, his gaze averted, seemingly processing the recent exchange. With a decisive gesture, he gave a thumbs up, indicating his readiness. Kane Sugawara then asked Aishu Sunny when she had learned his name, to which Aishu replied it was that very morning. He then inquired about their plans after running out of food, and Aishu admitted she hadn't anticipated having to venture outside in such a state. As the trio began their journey, walking down the middle of a suburban road, he suggested they head to the home center in the suburbs, noting the absence of cars made the middle of the road the safest path. Aishu Sunny, still feeling guilty, vowed she would not forget his name again. He then spotted a car, reflecting on the dangers of walking near the road's edge and encountering zombies unexpectedly at corners, realizing the truth in the saying that experience speaks volumes. Aishu Sunny warned against carelessly approaching the vehicle, emphasizing the danger of a zombie potentially lurking inside. Kane Sugawara concurred, observing that the car looked like it held nothing good. He acknowledged the need to be careful with zombies, regretting his initial curiosity. Kane Sugawara, however, then made a shocking remark, suggesting that if it were a female zombie, it would present an opportunity for sex, leaving Aishu Sunny visibly stunned. Kane, still with her unsettling demeanor, playfully struck male_survivor_1, asking him what that was for. Female_survivor_1, looking surprised, then offered to help him if he couldn't get excited again, implying a crude method. Female_survivor_1, blushing deeply, vehemently denied she would expose herself. Kane, with a sly smile, then suggested that showing her breast would help male_survivor_1 get an erection. The flustered female_survivor_1 told Kane to be quiet for a moment, while male_survivor_1, equally embarrassed, insisted he didn't mean it like that. Kane simply stated it was fine. As the group continued their journey, their attention shifted to a nearby convenience store where several zombies shambled inside, raising the question of what might be drawing them. Male_survivor_1, relieved, thought to himself that he was glad Kane hadn't told him to engage in sexual acts with the zombie. He then suggested to the others that they should pass by quietly and avoid provoking the creatures. The group cautiously approached the convenience store, observing the zombies through the large glass windows and wondering what could be causing such a ruckus inside. Suddenly, female_survivor_1, her eyes wide with alarm, realized there was someone still alive inside the convenience store. She cried out to male_survivor_1, calling him Sunny, and urged him to wait, as he seemed poised to act. Kane, questioned by female_survivor_1 about her super strength from the previous day, declared she didn't have it. She recounted testing herself that morning while searching for food, finding she couldn't open a locked door or throw a fridge. Female_survivor_1 concluded that Kane's strength was either temporary or conditional, but there was no time to test it now. Male_survivor_1, looking at both women, then asked if they would back down if he suggested abandoning the person inside for now. Kane, hearing his suggestion, sternly told him to listen, emphasizing that if anything happened to you, the vaccine would be lost and everything would be over. She added that she didn't want anyone getting injured. However, male_survivor_1 countered, suggesting it would be fine if the girl inside turned into a zombie, as you could simply cure her later. He reasoned it would be much safer to lure one zombie out after things had calmed down, rather than risking a direct confrontation. Meanwhile, the young girl inside the store was shown being overwhelmed by the attacking zombies. He held a stick, preparing to use it, but female_survivor_1 confronted him, questioning his plan to face the danger with such a meager weapon. She urged him to wait. Then, acknowledging his earlier cold-hearted suggestion, pleaded with him to consider helping the trapped girl just once. He responded, explaining that attempting to help someone after abandoning them in such a dire situation would be difficult, and he lacked the confidence to perform effectively under those conditions. She acknowledged his point, then instructed him to put the stick down. Internally, she admitted her own perceived weakness and apologized, yet still wondered if she truly could rise to the occasion. He elaborated on his strategy, warning that possessing a weapon might create a false sense of security, causing hesitation when immediate flight was the only option. He advised her never to rely on a weapon unless fully committed to its use, stressing that in danger, she should run without hesitation, as not everything would always work out. She then winked, assuring him she would never forget his gratitude and that he shouldn't think less of her for seeking his protection. With a newfound resolve, she declared she would handle the situation and told him to leave it to her. He then inquired about her earlier comment regarding a first impression, asking what she had done, to which she simply replied, nothing. In a sudden burst of speed, she dashed forward, leaving male_survivor_1 and the young_girl_1 behind, both stunned by her unexpected agility. As she moved, a thought solidified in her mind. Her deep, dreamless sleep had fully recharged her, leaving her brimming with energy. She vowed not to let fatigue or confusion cloud her judgment. Meanwhile, the trapped young_girl_1, Aishu Sunny, a prodigy in chemistry, clutched a baseball bat, surrounded by the encroaching undead. She launched herself into the convenience store, shattering the glass entrance, and began to fiercely engage the zombies within, proclaiming her intent to save the world alongside you. The young_girl_1, Aishu, watched in wide-eyed shock, her mouth agape, still gripping the baseball bat tightly. Female_survivor_1 landed inside, having created a gaping hole in the wall. She extended a hand to Aishu, urging her to hurry and escape through the newly formed opening, telling her not to overthink it, but simply to run. Aishu looked on, surprised by the sudden turn of events. A young woman with light hair, a skilled fighter, fiercely battled several grotesque, reanimated figures, striking one down with a powerful kick. Nearby, another young woman, dressed in a school uniform and clutching a staff, watched the chaotic struggle, her expression a mix of confusion and alarm. She seemed to be struggling to process the rapid, precise movements of her companion. The light-haired woman urgently commanded her companion to run, her voice sharp and direct. The schoolgirl responded with a quick affirmation, and both women immediately began to flee, leaping from a ledge and running across a rooftop. As they continued their escape, the schoolgirl glanced back, her eyes wide with fear as she saw more of the reanimated horrors pursuing them. Her companion noticed her hesitation and shouted a warning, urging her to keep moving as one of the monstrous figures lunged dangerously close. Despite the danger, the schoolgirl swung her staff with surprising force, striking one of the reanimated creatures. Her companion observed that even a makeshift weapon, wielded with a moment of hesitation, could deliver a fatal blow if one fought with the intent to kill. The creature recoiled, its face contorted in agony from the impact. However, the reanimated creatures were relentless, undeterred by pain. One of them lunged at the light-haired woman, who deftly dodged its attack. Meanwhile, the schoolgirl had joined another woman with long blonde hair, who pointed towards a distant area, instructing them to cross over to the other side. The blonde-haired woman urged the schoolgirl to hurry, questioning what she was doing. As they moved, the light-haired woman was seen falling from a height, seemingly overwhelmed by the pursuing reanimated figures. The blonde woman then noticed other survivors in the distance, identifying one as a chemist. Having regrouped, the schoolgirl introduced herself as Nariko Shibutsuji, expressing gratitude for the rescue but lamenting the lack of food. Her blonde-haired companion then inquired about the staff Nariko carried, to which Nariko explained it was from the Kendo Club and intended for self-defense. The light-haired woman listened intently, her expression unreadable. Suddenly, the blonde-haired woman roughly grabbed Nariko, pulling her close and lifting her skirt, claiming she needed to check something. Nariko cried out in surprise and protest, demanding to know what she was doing, while the light-haired woman watched with a slight frown. The blonde woman insisted she wouldn't do anything bad, but Nariko continued to struggle. Nariko, now visibly distressed, pulled away, explaining that if she had been bitten, her clothes would be torn and she would be bleeding. She questioned what they were doing to her. The blonde-haired woman turned away, stating that if Nariko had been bitten, it would be his turn. Nariko, still confused and upset, asked for clarification on what she meant. She confronted Nariko, asserting that the individual in question was nothing more than a perverted, reanimated creature. Nariko, visibly shocked, questioned if she was truly being told not to trust him, while internally wondering if they were indeed heading towards the home center. Meanwhile, a different schoolgirl stood before a large retail building, explaining that refugees had gathered there and that she herself had come from that very location. The blonde woman, the schoolgirl, and the female fighter discussed their next move. The fighter suggested they proceed as planned, but the schoolgirl expressed concern about causing trouble if more people suddenly appeared. The blonde woman, however, dismissed her worries, stating they would only know once they arrived. Nariko, still clutching her kendo staff, began to walk away with a downcast expression. The female fighter reached out, urging her not to go alone, as the blonde woman and the other schoolgirl watched, a sign indicating the homie store was 600 meters ahead. She continued to express her reluctance, stating that it felt difficult to turn back now, and perhaps it would be better if she did not go with them at all. The female fighter tried to reassure Nariko, telling her she would not die. However, the blonde woman interjected, reminding Nariko that if Sunny had not arrived earlier, she would have been dead. She then firmly grabbed Nariko's arm, insisting she come along. Nariko recoiled violently, shouting for the blonde woman not to touch her, and swung her kendo staff defensively, startling the female fighter. She looked distressed, muttering that it was not what the blonde woman thought, who in turn looked surprised, calling out Nariko's name. Nariko, still clutching her staff, apologized to both the blonde woman and the female fighter. She explained that she felt uneasy without her wooden sword, fearing it might be taken from her. The blonde woman looked annoyed by Nariko's outburst, while the female fighter declared that this time, she would be careful to avoid any attacks. The group continued their journey, but the blonde woman's earlier confrontation with Nariko had left a lingering tension. Now, the immediate threat of their surroundings weighed heavily on them. One of the young women, her face etched with fear, voiced a dire warning. If they remained outside the protective barrier, their very air would suddenly cease to exist. He turned back, addressing Nariko directly, his voice laced with concern as he questioned if she would simply perish if they separated now. He seemed to be grappling with his own sense of responsibility, muttering about being the one others relied upon. The young woman with short hair, still visibly shaken, could only manage a choked sound of protest. Despite his earlier concern, he then offered Nariko a reassuring thumbs up, a gesture that only deepened her confusion. She wondered what kind of person he truly was, while the other young woman, perhaps feeling a pang of guilt, apologized for causing worry. Meanwhile, the blonde woman, overhearing the exchange, silently affirmed that he was a good, considerate person, perhaps even a little too much so, as sweat beaded on her brow. As they continued to walk away from the building, the blonde woman pressed Nariko, asking if her difficult situation was truly something that could be equated with life itself. Nariko, looking back, questioned the premise, suggesting it was not. The blonde woman passionately declared that life was the only thing in the world that could not be taken back, and she refused to stand idly by while someone abandoned another person. She offered to listen to Nariko's circumstances, promising understanding. Nariko, in turn, questioned why the blonde woman seemed so intent on abandoning something, but then conceded, stating she would understand if it meant staying with everyone. As the group continued their trek, the blonde woman shifted the topic, asking the male survivor if infection was possible through means other than a bite. He pondered for a moment before replying that he did not believe so. She then elaborated, suggesting that a scratch from an extended claw, for instance, could still be dangerous, illustrating her point with a small, pained sound, as if imagining the scenario. The blonde woman expressed her concern, calling it a serious matter. The young woman with short hair confirmed her fears, explaining that it was not merely a scratch. The likelihood of the virus entering the bloodstream through such a wound was exceptionally high. The blonde woman continued, asserting that this particular scenario did not involve mucosal contact, and therefore, further explanation was unnecessary. Nariko, however, interrupted, demanding to know what she was doing, while the short-haired young woman looked on in confusion. She continued, winking playfully as she warned that one could become a zombie from various forms of intimate contact, then questioned why someone would expose themselves to such a risk. Her words caused Nariko to blush deeply, prompting her to hesitantly ask for clarification on the strange things being discussed, while the blonde woman beside her looked down, seemingly uncomfortable. Nariko quickly covered her mouth, her face flushed with embarrassment, as the blonde woman also averted her gaze, a faint blush on her cheeks. Still, she persisted, looking upwards as she mused about the behavior of recent high school girls, seemingly undeterred by the others' discomfort. Suddenly, Nariko was overwhelmed by a disturbing memory, a male hand roughly grabbing her hair, her own tongue lolling out in distress, while the ghostly image of a male survivor flickered in her mind, a chilling reminder of a past encounter. Moments later, the blonde woman announced their arrival at a large retail store named Home Joy, its facade looming before them. She then explained that she would wait there while the others went inside to gather information, but Nariko, still visibly shaken, warned them to be careful not to get caught, clutching a long pole tightly. Nariko remained, her gaze fixed downwards, as a fragmented memory of shattered glass and a grotesque, cracked hand flashed through her mind, a chilling echo of a past injury or encounter, leaving her to silently repeat to herself that she was all right. Two schoolgirls discussed the unfolding situation. One asked if only bad people were coming, while the other reassured her to wait, as they would return soon. A third schoolgirl, with short dark hair, questioned if they were truly going. Meanwhile, outside, the confident young woman with short, wavy hair declared that even against bad people, a chemist would surely win. She pointed forward with a wide smile, urging her companions, the blonde woman and the young man in the track jacket, to go. The young man seemed surprised by her enthusiasm, while a masked figure stood ominously in the background. As they approached, two masked figures, armed with blunt weapons, confronted them. The young man in the track jacket moved forward, but the confident woman quickly intervened, trying to stop him from getting any closer, warning him not to be bitten. The blonde woman looked on with concern. Both the confident woman and the blonde woman looked distressed, The confident woman insisted that getting bitten was absolutely out of the question, emphasizing the severe complications it would cause. Elsewhere, a man in a suit, a former teacher, walked with a worried expression. He was approached by the young woman with dark hair and the young man in the track jacket, who explained that people were calling him teacher because of his past profession. He had taken on the role of a coordinator in their current refuge and asked them to listen to his story. He pondered his situation, realizing he had been relying solely on the food stored in his own home. But now even that was no longer enough. He wondered if they had reached their limit. Back with the travelers, the confident woman addressed the masked figures, explaining that they were on a journey to Tokyo. She admitted that, at this point, even their fate for tomorrow remained uncertain. Later, the confident woman approached the former teacher, acknowledging that her request was a difficult one, but asked if he might consider sharing some food with them. He covered his mouth, his expression still etched with distress, and asked why they needed it. He then questioned the group, including the confident woman, the blonde woman, and the young man in the track jacket, asking why they had gone to such great lengths to come to Tokyo. The confident woman replied that there were specific circumstances that led them there. Still looking troubled, the former teacher finally stated that he would guide them, but only if they followed his instructions precisely. A blonde woman explained that with the growing number of refugees, new problems inevitably emerged, causing everyone to become excessively wary of newcomers. A dark-haired woman listened intently, while a masked figure stood silently nearby. Her words were met with a sharp retort from a light-haired woman, who stated that the blonde woman's daughter would remain with them for the time being. The blonde woman's eyes widened in disbelief and anger. Angered, the blonde woman retorted that a few individuals would make no difference, warning them against making a scene that would alarm everyone. She then turned and walked away, promising to return soon. Both the dark-haired man and the light-haired woman watched her depart, their expressions a mixture of surprise and concern. The man uttered a soft, questioning sound. Meanwhile, the teacher led the light-haired woman and the dark-haired man into a vast, makeshift shelter, instructing them to proceed directly to the back, without pausing. As they moved deeper, the light-haired woman observed that people were hidden behind the numerous curtains lining the space. A quiet instruction echoed, warning them not to open the partitions. The teacher explained that such divisions were necessary. Without groups concealing their resources from one another, conflicts inevitably erupted. He then recounted the rapid decline. In just 1 month, the city had plunged into chaos, with no aid from the self-defense forces. Those who had lost their homes and escape routes had continuously streamed into this very place. This was the reality of refugee life, a constant state of anxiety where the next day was never guaranteed. Individuals who, under normal circumstances, would never have associated with each other were now forced to coexist in the same cramped spaces. Such close quarters and desperate conditions inevitably bred internal strife, leading to rampant theft and outbursts of violence. The teacher concluded his grim account, emphasizing that this complete societal breakdown, including acts of sexual assault, had all transpired within a mere month. He stood before the group, his arms outstretched, as if presenting the full, horrifying scope of their new reality. He emphasized that no help would arrive, and the duration of their remaining electricity was uncertain, just as the end of their ordeal remained unknown. All their remaining resources were contained within this very place. He continued, asserting that while everyone present understood the necessity of protecting their food supplies, the practicalities of doing so were proving exceptionally difficult. Interrupting him, the young woman with short, light hair inquired about a supermarket they had passed on the other side of the road when they first arrived, asking if it was now inaccessible or compromised. He grimaced, explaining that the building was indeed untouched, but it was not a supermarket. It was a police station. Inside, the situation was dire. He revealed that individuals who had been killed while seeking food had turned into zombies, now swarming within the building. They had been forced to seal off the entrance 8 separate times to contain the threat. Despite the grim news, he admitted they were still considering ways to retrieve the food from inside the station. The young woman, however, cautioned them not to approach it carelessly. As she spoke, he apologized for their inability to assist further with the food situation at the supermarket. He then issued a stern warning. They were not to open the entrance, and if instructed, they were not to attempt to breach it. He continued, addressing someone named Kane about their next steps, lamenting that there was no one available to provide them with equipment. The young woman repeated the name, Kane-san, in confusion. Suddenly, a realization struck them. The young woman cried out in disbelief, exclaiming that it had only been a few minutes and demanding that Aizawa search for Kane. He, in turn, instructed her to search the immediate vicinity while he took the right side. Their faces contorted in fear as the young woman voiced her terrifying suspicion. Kane might have been taken. He echoed her dread, realizing that without Kane, there was truly no one left to equip them. She delivered a forceful kick, her frustration evident as she declared that if something was not good, then it simply was not good. The young man she confronted, male_survivor_1, quickly acknowledged her point, stating his understanding. Meanwhile, a tense standoff unfolded elsewhere, as a group of individuals, some armed, faced an unseen threat. A voice from within the group vehemently warned others not to make contact, followed by a frustrated curse. The situation escalated rapidly as the blonde_woman_1, now identified as Kane, struggled against a masked assailant who held her firmly. Despite her predicament, she fiercely declared her intent to kill, even as she landed a desperate kick to the groin of another masked figure, causing him to cry out in pain about his injury. She then defiantly stated her uncertainty about what she would do next, her voice filled with a mix of pain and resolve. Her resistance was met with swift retaliation as one of the masked figures roughly gagged her, silencing her protests. Another masked assailant held the male_survivor_1, who was also struggling, as the aggressors continued their assault. With her voice muffled, Kane's eyes welled with tears as the masked figure taunted her, calling her a weak woman, yet stubbornly defiant. He then suggested they proceed with their intentions, his words chillingly predatory. Elsewhere, the female_fighter_1, along with male_survivor_1 and schoolgirl_1, looked on in horror, their faces etched with distress. The female_fighter_1 desperately called out Kane's name, urging her to come this way, a plea filled with urgency and fear. The situation worsened dramatically as Kane lay on the ground, her clothes torn, held down by two masked figures. The male_survivor_1, witnessing the brutal assault, pleaded with the aggressors to stop, questioning their sudden, aggressive targeting of a girl and their audacity to return to the shelter after such a crime. One of the masked figures, however, merely scoffed, dismissing him as a foolish idiot who believed he could do as he pleased. Amidst the chaos, Kane, despite her terror, managed to utter a desperate plea for Yukon to hurry, realizing the utter depravity of her attackers. A young woman frantically searched the perimeter of a building, calling out repeatedly for someone, but found no one. She realized she had circled the entire structure, yet her companions were nowhere to be found. A chilling thought began to form. Something was amiss with her and her friends. She then recalled a previous encounter, realizing with a jolt that she might have been the first to come into contact with the infected, even before the building's occupants. The horrifying implication dawned on her. She was the sole carrier of the vaccine, yet she was turning those she sought to save into mere iron bullets. She questioned her own actions, wondering what had become of her. Overwhelmed by these thoughts, she collapsed to the ground, her hand clutching her head. She wondered if she was more mentally affected than she allowed herself to believe. She resolved that her internal struggles were irrelevant. From this moment forward, she would put aside any mistakes and focus solely on the task at hand. With renewed determination, she began to ascend a ladder on the side of a building, knowing that her immediate priority was to find the two missing individuals. Reaching the rooftop, she surveyed the cityscape, a gust of wind catching her clothes. She admitted to herself that she was not as composed as she appeared. From her vantage point, she desperately called out, pleading for Yukon and Kane-san to make some noise, to give her any sign of their presence. Meanwhile, elsewhere in the city, Kane lay helpless on the ground, held down by a man who roughly commanded her to cease her futile resistance. She lay helpless, surrounded by several men in protective gear, who casually discussed their turn with her. One of them remarked that it was good he had chosen rock in their game, implying a disturbing outcome. As tears streamed down her face, the man stroked her head mockingly, calling her innocent and pure, while another masked figure knelt beside them, asking for agreement on their actions. Suddenly, a figure burst into the room, delivering a powerful kick that sent the man reeling away from her. The protagonist had arrived, her intervention swift and decisive. The man stumbled back, surprised by the sudden attack, while the masked figure watched. Kane, seeing her friend, cried out her name in a mix of relief and disbelief, questioning how she had found. The masked figure, observing the unfolding chaos, gripped a metal pipe and grimly concluded that since they had been seen, there was no choice but to eliminate all witnesses. With a chilling resolve, the masked figure raised the pipe, preparing to strike the protagonist, who was still held captive by the other man. He declared that if they were exposed, it would be disastrous, and therefore, no one could be allowed to leave alive. She was struck with brutal force, the impact sending blood splattering as her body recoiled. Her friend, Kane, screamed in horror, her face contorted in anguish, as the protagonist collapsed to the ground, her eyes wide with shock and pain. As she lay motionless, the perpetrators stood over her, one holding a pipe, the other restraining Kane, who was now bound and gagged. The man with the pipe remarked that the protagonist had taken quite a hit, wondering if she was dead. Kane, tears streaming down her face, desperately pleaded with her captor, begging him to stop. He, however, remained unmoved, his expression grim as he asserted that she was better off dead and that he would kill her anyway. The perpetrators continued their grim discussion, one suggesting that if they were going to throw people to the zombies, they might as well kill them first. He declared that it was a new era where they had to kill to have their way, and that the fun was just beginning. Moments later, the protagonist stirred, groaning in pain as she slowly regained consciousness. She wondered if she had been hit in the head, realizing she had been beaten and kicked. A sudden, chilling thought struck her. As she struggled to stand, calling out a name, the two perpetrators advanced on her, pipes raised, ready to strike again. She braced herself, attempting to shield her head from the impending blows. Meanwhile, from a distance, Nariko and another young woman watched in horror as Kane was dragged away by the men. Nariko, her eyes wide with shock, exclaimed that Kane was being taken by the police. The other woman, equally stunned, wondered what was happening. The protagonist, now seemingly imprisoned behind bars, looked on with a desperate expression. Suddenly, Nariko, having witnessed the brutality, stepped forward, wielding a pipe herself. She confronted the perpetrators, demanding to know if they were the ones who had expelled the teacher, her face set with a fierce determination. She stood her ground, pipe in hand, as one of the perpetrators held a struggling, disfigured man by a rope. The perpetrator, his face obscured by a mask, warned her, asking if she understood the implications of their actions. Nariko, her eyes wide with shock at the sight of the restrained individual, could only utter a confused huh. Without hesitation, she swung the pipe, engaging the masked figures. One of them lunged, attempting to strike her with a baton, but she deftly dodged the blow, her determination unwavering. As the skirmish continued, Kane and the female fighter watched, their expressions a mix of fear and concern. Suddenly, the restrained, disfigured man broke free, letting out a guttural roar. The perpetrators, seeing their advantage, gloated, declaring that they had captured 3 individuals. Amidst the chaos, the female fighter joined the fray, launching a fierce kick at one of the perpetrators. Nariko, still wielding her pipe, continued to fend off the remaining attackers, her resolve hardening. Moments later, the immediate threat was neutralized. The perpetrators lay defeated on the ground, their weapons scattered. One of them, still conscious, weakly claimed they had only knocked someone out, not killed them. Just as the dust settled, a new figure emerged, moving with swift precision. He effortlessly disarmed one of the perpetrators, delivering a decisive blow that sent the man sprawling. Nariko and the female fighter watched in stunned silence as the newcomer acted. Nariko, her eyes wide, then realized with a gasp that one of the perpetrators had managed to escape during the confusion. The man, now revealed to be Koichi Iase, a former teacher, expressed regret for his misjudgment, acknowledging his rash actions. He then turned his attention to the defeated perpetrators, demanding to know why they were with the boy. As the group gathered, Nariko, the female fighter, Kane, and another male survivor stood before Koichi. Nariko, looking at him with a mix of recognition and confusion, addressed him as Koichi-san, questioning if he was no longer a teacher. Koichi Iase, his expression stern, confronted Nariko, demanding to know why she was there. He then agreed to move away from the immediate area, while the female fighter suggested they should leave this place first. Kane stood nearby, looking somewhat dazed. Moments later, Koichi, the female fighter, Kane, and other survivors stood over a prone, seemingly incapacitated zombie. Koichi declared that he would call someone to deal with the situation. As the group began to disperse, the female fighter gently guided Kane, while a masked figure confirmed that they would escort Kane to safety. The masked figure and the female fighter led Kane away, the female fighter casting a glance back at the remaining group. Meanwhile, Koichi expressed concern for Nariko, but quickly shifted to a serious tone. He explained that in their current dire circumstances, theft was a grave crime, second only to murder, and that she was suspected of robbery, leaving them no choice but to expel her. Nariko tried to interject, claiming she had been helping others before the zombies appeared, but Koichi remained firm, stating that no exceptions could be made, especially in a place where death was a constant threat. He then questioned if she had arrived with someone else, rather than by chance. Distraught, Nariko pleaded with Koichi to stop, while the female fighter observed the tense exchange. Nariko then asked if she was the problem and if she should simply leave. Koichi turned his back on Nariko, who reached out to him, her face etched with despair. He pondered the unfolding drama, feeling as though he was merely watching a continuation of events he had no control over. As he walked away, his footsteps heavy, a schoolgirl and a female fighter called out to him, asking what was wrong. He muttered about an exploration and a return, his expression unreadable. Moments later, the exploration team returned, their figures silhouetted against the light. Among them were a male survivor and a female survivor, both carrying backpacks, while others, including Kane, observed their arrival from a distance. He then handed a backpack to the male survivor, stating they would discuss matters later. Nearby, Nariko stood, her head bowed, a look of distress on her face as she wondered why she was even present. The male survivor, pointing, questioned the absence of the security team and asked if he and the female fighter should attend a representative meeting to explain the situation. He looked visibly annoyed by the suggestion. Later, the group, including the male survivor, the female fighter, the female survivor, and Kane, gathered. He began to report on the outcomes of their recent endeavors. He continued, explaining that the community was divided into 2 main teams: the exploration teams, who actively searched the surroundings, and the life preservation teams, who lacked the physical strength to venture outside. He grimly added that the security team had recently been annihilated. A female fighter then asked if the cause of the annihilation was due to them, referring to those who had come from outside. The female survivor listened intently, awaiting the answer. He was visibly distressed, covering his face with his hand, lamenting the trouble they had caused, and the exploration team's repeated lack of caution. The male survivor handed him a backpack, suggesting they address that matter first. His name, Humagai Futashi, was noted as the representative of the exploration team. The grim reality of their situation became clear. Searching nearby houses had reached its limit. Further exploration would require venturing into the city center, towards the station, a path fraught with extreme danger. The female fighter remarked on the caution needed when dealing with zombies. The female survivor agreed, explaining that many sacrifices were made early on because the zombies were simply too strong. She added that their slow, lumbering movements were deceptive, making them even more dangerous. The zombies, when struck, do not defend themselves but immediately rise again. After 2 to 5 seconds, they recognize their assailant and relentlessly pursue them. This persistent, unyielding nature is their true terror. He explained that if one were to make a mistake in their escape, it would be over. He commended her for her correct understanding that fighting was the only viable approach. She conceded that zombies were indeed dangerous, but acknowledged that a small number could still be outrun. As he peered through binoculars at the distant, zombie-infested city center, he declared it impossible to discern anything clearly from afar. He lamented the sheer number of people, which inevitably meant an equal number of the undead. She cried out in frustration, asserting that it was simply too much. Slumped and defeated, he proclaimed they had reached their limit, questioning whether they should resort to farming to prepare for winter. She then interjected, asking how long they intended to remain in their current location, relying solely on agriculture. Onodotami, the 32-year-old representative of the life preservation team, vehemently asserted that they could no longer endure their current environment, especially with food supplies dwindling and rations being cut even further. She pointed out that the exploration team bore the brunt of all dangerous tasks. Confronting the exhausted teacher, she demanded to know where he slept and how he justified his calorie consumption if he contributed nothing, insisting he stop complaining and join the exploration efforts. He quickly intervened, pulling the teacher to his feet and reminding Tammy that everyone had agreed the teacher would be useless if he sustained an injury. The teacher, flustered, apologized, attempting to de-escalate the tense situation. She sat beside him, agreeing with his earlier sentiment, then reflected that their current circumstances were not truly an environment where they could afford to divide food fairly. He then asked the teacher if they could use that thing again, but the teacher immediately dismissed the idea, stating that the stacked food supplies were a last resort. He sternly warned that merely touching them would result in expulsion. Meanwhile, Nariko, the schoolgirl, was seen crouching in a dimly lit storage area, gazing intently at the towering stacks of forbidden supplies. As she stared at the forbidden provisions, a hand with a distinctive patterned sleeve suddenly clamped onto her arm. Her eyes widened in terror, a chilling realization dawning upon her that no reason, no matter how dire, could justify her actions. Tammy questioned the teacher, asking if he truly felt nothing for Nariko. He, looking down thoughtfully, stated that there were no exceptions to the rules, and only the outcome mattered. The teacher, with a resolute expression, declared his unwavering support for his own decision. As the consequences of the schoolgirl's actions settled, the man in the dark jacket glared at the woman in the beret, accusing her of being pleased that one less mouth meant more food for herself. She met his gaze with a calm, almost smug expression. He continued his impassioned argument, pointing out the nearby supermarket filled with food, yet emphasizing the extreme danger of retrieving it due to the zombie infestation. He declared that only they, the community, were foolish enough to even consider such a risk. The woman in the beret simply dismissed his outburst, calling him a fool. Despite his frustration, the woman in the beret calmly reiterated the core issue. The schoolgirl, whom she again labeled a fool, had ventured out alone to the supermarket in search of food. The other survivors at the table listened intently, some with concern, others with a grim understanding. Her words triggered a memory for the woman in the beret, recalling the schoolgirl's determined declaration that if food was found, she would return, and that she would do something to ensure it. Back in the present, the woman in the beret continued to eat, remarking with satisfaction that the food was good for two people, implying a benefit from the schoolgirl's absence. The man with the dark, wavy hair covered his face in exasperation, muttering about her selfishness. The young woman with short, wavy hair clapped her hands together, asking if the supermarket had been sealed off. The man with the dark, wavy hair raised his hand, indicating that it had not. He then explained, pointing to a diagram, that the route from the rooftop parking lot remained accessible. He clarified that zombies would not climb the stairs unless actively lured, suggesting a potential, albeit dangerous, entry point. The young woman with short, wavy hair pointed, asking if a woman had gone ahead alone. The man with the dark, wavy hair confirmed that it was an unpracticed route, one that allowed entry but offered no clear path for return. A memory surfaced, showing the woman in the beret questioning the schoolgirl about a specific individual, her appearance, build, and any distinguishing features. The schoolgirl recalled details like a white shirt, skinny jeans, and the person being a former teacher, describing her as being in her late 20s with dark, shoulder-length hair that flipped outwards. The woman in the beret then pressed for the timing of this failure, just as the man in the dark jacket exclaimed a name, Yukun, startling the young woman with short, wavy hair. The young woman with short, wavy hair, seemingly undeterred by the danger, pointed to herself and eagerly volunteered to go, asking if she could explore the accessible route. The man in the dark jacket immediately admonished her, warning her not to speak foolishly or seek death, and to avoid causing trouble for the group. The man with the bandaged face looked on, surprised. She plummeted downwards, her body flailing as the ground rushed up to meet her. Around her, the others reacted with alarm. A young man reached out, shouting, "Are you okay?" While another urged, "Don't die." Yet, just as impact seemed inevitable, she was abruptly suspended mid-air, upside down, as if time itself had frozen around her. The others stared in disbelief, a masked figure observing impassively, while a man with his back to her questioned the bizarre phenomenon. As she hung there, a strange realization dawned upon her. She had intended to solve the food problem, and then she would make him have sex with her. The thought, raw and primal, echoed in her mind. Let's fuck. A leader outlined two critical missions. First, to secure provisions from a supermarket, and second, to locate a specific woman. Following this, Nariko, with an energetic demeanor, discussed a perilous undertaking with Kane-san. She emphasized that only the two of them would cross a dangerous bridge, assuring Kane-san that she would not provoke any zombies. Nariko then pressed Kane-san, asking if she shared the resolve to die quietly together should the situation demand it, offering a confident thumbs up. Kane-san reacted with a look of profound shock. Meanwhile, Professor A, looking contemplative, seemed to reluctantly accept the grim prospect of dying, as if echoing Nariko's earlier sentiment. Moments later, a man in glasses angrily confronted Professor A, demanding to know what was good about their current predicament and asserting that they had missed an opportunity to break through the situation. Nariko's image briefly appeared in a thought bubble, seemingly in agreement. As the tension mounted, the leader woman turned to Professor A, asking if he could protect Kane-san and Nariko until she and her companion returned. Professor A acknowledged the request regarding Kane-san, but his expression suggested reservations. The man in glasses then pointed accusingly at Kane-san, who sat distressed on a bed, arguing vehemently that they had their own circumstances and could not simply take back someone they had once expelled. The leader woman, however, firmly insisted that Kane-san be protected until their return. Kane-san, visibly distraught, protested loudly that being expelled was tantamount to a death sentence. She declared that she would take care of the two of them herself. Tears streamed down Kane-san's face as she questioned the nature of her crime, lamenting her inability to even respond. She then asked if they intended to continue fabricating charges and chasing her out until she was the last one remaining. The man in glasses watched her sternly, while Professor A observed with a serious gaze. Still reeling from the previous confrontation, she turned to Nariko, her voice laced with distrust. She questioned Nariko's intentions, asking if she truly believed in their group and if the talk of a search for relics meant Nariko intended to return with them. Nariko, in turn, dismissed her concerns as unnecessary meddling, suggesting she was overthinking things. Overwhelmed by the relentless conflict and her deep-seated fears, she curled up on a couch, murmuring a desperate plea for everyone to simply stop. Meanwhile, in a different part of the facility, the man in glasses stood with a stern demeanor, observing Professor A, who appeared slumped and dejected. Nariko stood nearby, while a new, younger individual with dark hair and a distinctive black and white jacket also watched the scene unfold. The young man, his eyes wide with a sudden surge of fear, recoiled from an unseen threat, his hand instinctively raised as if to ward off a terrifying thought. He muttered about the horrifying possibility of zombification if it were to happen to him. He then turned to Nariko, demanding to know why she had kept the ability to cure such a secret. Nariko, extending a hand as if to calm him, seemed to be preparing a careful response. As he began to walk away, Nariko explained that one could not simply entrust such a cure to an amateur, nor could just anyone administer it. He acknowledged her point, though his expression remained troubled. They soon arrived on a rooftop, Nariko announcing their destination. He remarked on the surprising quietness of the area, considering the implied presence of zombies below. Nariko then turned to him, a sly smirk playing on her lips, and made a suggestive comment, playfully warning him to stop pointing his finger. She then pointed to a ladder, declaring it the entrance, and instructed him to go first. He hesitated, clearly taken aback by her sudden command, but began to climb. As he ascended, Nariko pondered whether her judgment was flawed, questioning if it was truly correct to keep him out of sight and to have him follow her so closely. She listened as you stated his intention to follow her, but then he asked if it would be acceptable for him to flee should the situation become dire. Her eyes widened in surprise at his unexpected condition. Agreeing to his terms, she instructed him to proceed with caution. With that, she began to climb through the opening onto the rooftop, with him following close behind. Once inside the building, he observed the overall dimness of the interior. He reached out to a light switch, wondering aloud if the electricity was even functioning. Startled by his action, she turned to him with a look of exasperation, scolding him for pressing the button and warning him to be more careful in the future. He then moved to an elevator, sitting down nearby and noting that it was currently on the second floor. As the elevator doors slid open, she stepped inside, a voice announcing the doors were opening. Moments later, she lay unconscious on the floor of the elevator, her body still. The elevator doors began to close, leaving her still prone on the floor. She slowly regained consciousness, her brow furrowed with concern as she looked around the dimly lit space, trying to make sense of her surroundings. Meanwhile, Yu found himself in what appeared to be a store, surrounded by several disheveled, vacant-eyed individuals, a grim realization dawning upon him. He continued his conversation on the phone, asking for an update from Sunny-san, as Nariko, walking ahead, apologized and suggested they move a little higher up the stairs. From behind him, another voice urged them to reevaluate their surroundings once they had finished looking around. Suddenly, the relative calm shattered as a horde of zombies tumbled down the staircase, catching both Yu and Nariko in a chaotic fall. Amidst the chaos, Nariko cried out to him, demanding to see if he had been bitten. She quickly grabbed him, checking for injuries, and he reassured her, confirming that he was unharmed and had not been bitten. He looked distressed, explaining that the sudden attack had come from behind, catching him completely off guard. Nariko listened, her expression etched with concern. With Nariko now injured or unconscious, he carefully carried her down the remaining steps of the staircase, seeking a safer position. As he continued to support Nariko, who lay on the ground, he looked back up the stairs and pointed, urging her to observe a particular zombie that was now crawling towards them. Nariko, still recovering, acknowledged its presence. Nariko, clutching her head, forced herself to focus, realizing this was no time for self-pity, but for critical situational assessment. She observed a mutated zombie, its form distorted with exposed veins and a long, unsettling shadow. She pondered if it had failed to bite her, noting its unusual characteristics as an unknown female variant, and a chilling realization dawned upon her. It seemed to be evolving, signaling a new, more dangerous phase. With her hand already showing signs of infection with prominent veins, Nariko desperately crawled into an elevator, determined to avoid further bites before she inevitably lost consciousness. Her infected hand reached for the button, indicating the second floor. Moments later, Nariko and you were once again together on the stairs, their faces contorted in horror. A massive, veiny hand of a mutated zombie loomed in the foreground, while you exclaimed that the noise they had made was causing the other zombies to become more active. Nariko gasped in alarm. The chaotic scene fragmented around them as they considered the dire consequences. One of them worried that if the zombies were allowed to cause a ruckus and accidentally escape outside, they would face severe repercussions. The other, however, countered with a grim determination, stating that the fight would continue until total annihilation. He struggled to hold Nariko back, her arm now visibly veined, and her expression disturbingly aggressive. She insisted he remain where he was, declaring that she would take care of everything. With a determined, almost manic look, she affirmed her resolve, her veined arm now fully exposed. Then, with a sudden burst of unnatural strength, she lunged forward. She continued her violent outburst, effortlessly throwing a figure with a powerful swing, a disturbing grin spreading across her face as she reveled in her newfound might. As her transformation intensified, tearing at her clothing, she turned her aggression on him, forcing him to desperately defend himself. She lamented the lack of ropes, suggesting they would have been useful. Still grappling with her, he tried to appeal to her, reminding her of their objective. However, she dismissed his concerns, pointing to the inert figures of other infected individuals scattered across the floor and warning him against making any noise. She continued to taunt him, her voice laced with a chilling glee, suggesting they should make a ruckus and complete their task right there. He stared back, utterly horrified by her malevolent words. Bound by ropes, a woman with long, reddish-brown hair struggled, her skin covered in prominent veins, her eyes wide with distress. A voice noted the impossibility of moving her in this zombie-like state, warning that any further action could activate other nearby zombies. He approached the transformed woman, who now stood with an unnaturally muscular physique, her veinous skin still prominent. You declared that she must return to her own will, asserting that this was precisely why she needed to be cured right there, amidst the looming figures of other zombies in the background. He embraced the struggling woman, cautioning her not to touch him so roughly. He internally reasoned that a zombie, once touched, would become aroused and docile. Meanwhile, Nariko watched the scene unfold, her expression filled with distress. Nariko, visibly upset, warned you to stop, imploring him not to create another chaotic situation like the one that had occurred with Kane-san. He looked shocked and offered a stammering apology. They both observed a device displaying a critical danger, alert, and a rapidly increasing numerical value. Nariko explained that it was detrimental to induce pleasure too suddenly, suggesting that if the woman were to be stimulated loudly, the consequences would already be understood. Nariko looked at you, who was now confined behind bars, his expression one of exhaustion and deep distress. A woman with long dark hair, her face contorted in fear, declared that it was impossible to remain vigilant against a horde of zombies. Other terrified individuals surrounded her, their faces etched with despair. Meanwhile, Nariko, observing the transformed woman, urged you to be gentle and not let go of her. She suggested they needed to think of something, as you, still holding the transformed woman, looked distressed. Nariko then sat, a thoughtful expression on her face, as a faint glow emanated from her hand. Behind her, the spectral image of Manko Kapak, an ancient figure, appeared, holding an axe and a sun symbol. She wondered if merely showing her breast would be enough to find a solution. As Nariko pondered, Yu's hands were seen gently touching the transformed woman's inner thighs, causing her to react with a surprised gasp. Nariko, still observing, remarked on the situation. He looked on with wide, shocked eyes as the transformed woman, now visibly aroused, began to pull up her sweater, her expression flushed. The transformed woman cried out, blaming herself, her veiny hands trembling. Meanwhile, Yu's mind drifted to a painful memory, a time when he, Nariko, and others stood helpless, unable to intervene as someone suffered, everyone already pushed to their limits. He silently resolved that someone had to try harder, so that no one else would have to endure such a memory. She was alone, huddled in despair, her voice a desperate plea for help, echoing into the void. Suddenly, both you and Nariko recoiled in shock, their eyes wide and mouths agape, as if witnessing something utterly unexpected. He stared in disbelief, the transformed woman now completely limp and naked in his arms, her body still flushed from the intense process. Beside him, Nariko gasped, her hand flying to her mouth in shock, her eyes wide with alarm at the sudden, unexpected turn of events. Her initial shock quickly gave way to growing anxiety as she glanced around nervously, beads of sweat forming on her brow. The air grew heavy with an unseen dread, and her grip tightened on the railing, her expression contorting with fear. The source of their terror erupted into full view as a horde of grotesque zombies, their faces twisted in ravenous hunger, began to tear through the barricade, their guttural screams echoing through the confined space. Nariko, now screaming in panic, urged you to flee immediately, reminding him that both of them needed to escape. He, however, remained frozen, clutching the unconscious woman, realizing with a sickening dread that she was completely unable to move on her own. Nariko, burdened by the unconscious transformed victim she carried, struggled to keep pace as you urgently pushed her towards the elevator, a horde of zombies closing in rapidly behind them. He bravely engaged a mutated zombie directly, buying precious moments for Nariko, who continued to struggle with her heavy load, the elevator still just out of reach. As you fought with a desperate intensity, fending off the monstrous creature, Nariko also battled the encroaching zombies while finally reaching the elevator, which had just arrived. She cried out for them to get inside. She rushed towards the open doors, still carrying the victim. But you, still grappling with the mutated zombie, urgently warned her of a threat from behind. Nariko managed to get inside the elevator, turning to look back just as he was violently thrown by the mutated zombie outside. The elevator doors began to close, announcing their imminent closure. With the doors now sealed, leaving the horde behind, Nariko collapsed to the floor, utterly exhausted but safe. You stood over her, catching his breath after the harrowing escape. Nariko remained unconscious on the floor, prompting you to wonder why she wasn't recovering or waking up as quickly as Kane-san had after her own transformation. He continued to speak to her, reassuring her not to blame herself and that everything would be all right, despite her continued unresponsiveness. Moments later, Nariko finally stirred, her eyes opening. She reached up, touching her cheek, and realized with a start that she had sustained a cut during the struggle. Nariko, still reeling from her recent injury, pondered the implications. She wondered if she should simply leave the wound untreated to see if her body would develop antibodies. You, however, reminded her of the rapid zombie transformation that occurred through mucus contact. Nariko then suggested a different, more direct approach. She proposed a startling idea. What if she were to become a zombie again? You recoiled, her face etched with alarm, firmly rejecting the notion. She declared it was absolutely out of the question. Without warning, Nariko leaned in and kissed you, a desperate attempt to test her theory or perhaps to heal them both. Behind them, the elevator doors began to close, revealing a fallen, unmoving figure inside. As the elevator doors sealed shut, a zombie's hand was momentarily trapped before being severed. Nariko, her expression intense, immediately asked you if she felt healed. You looked back, surprised and uncertain. Suddenly, a door burst open, and the leader woman stormed in, her face contorted with anger and concern. She demanded to know what they were doing, clearly worried about the commotion. In the background, you, Nariko, and Kana-san could be seen. Meanwhile, Kana-san, looking apologetic, explained that the home center had been uncomfortable. Nariko was visible climbing out of a window, with you observing her actions. The leader woman, still agitated, scolded Kana-san, reminding her that she had borrowed camping equipment and that they would be staying there. Kana-san listened, her expression still apologetic. Kana-san, surprised by the leader woman's outburst, asked if Kyoka-san was all right. You, in the background, had a fleeting thought, realizing she had forgotten the leader woman's name once again. Later, you whispered to Nariko, suggesting that only Kyoka-san should be taken to the other side. She then mused about the potential difficulties if someone were to awaken without any memory of what had transpired. Nariko listened intently, her expression thoughtful. Yu's mind raced, contemplating the significant events that seemed poised to unfold among the gathered people. Her stomach growled loudly, interrupting the serious discussion. Nariko, holding a bag of supplies, asked if they should eat. The leader woman, still unconscious, lay nearby as Kana-san observed her. You reassured them that the leader woman had no external injuries and would eventually awaken. Yu's companions, Nariko, Kana-san, Professor A, and the man in glasses, gathered around a bag filled with canned goods. Nariko expressed concern, asking if it was truly acceptable to take so much, while the others seemed to agree that the provisions, collected by Kyoka-san, were necessary. Meanwhile, you lay sleeping on the ground, her breathing soft and steady, as Nariko stood over her, watching. The other figures remained in the background, their forms indistinct. The group had managed to gather a significant amount of canned food, but some of the cans were already crushed and dented. They knew that once these provisions were gone, there would be nothing left. Nariko, with a determined smile, declared that they had two immediate problems to solve: securing the rescued individuals and figuring out how to extract the contents from the damaged cans. Professor A, a small figure in the background, seemed to ponder her words. Their thoughts turned to a large building in the distance, a home JOY store, realizing that significant effort and ingenuity would be required to prepare for their next steps. Later, within a makeshift camp of small tents, illuminated by a glowing lantern, Nariko announced that Kyoka-san was still not awake. She urged everyone to rest for the day and promised they would move on tomorrow. As the others settled down, Nariko sat beside the still sleeping you, her expression heavy with regret. She lamented having forced Kyoka-san, a person she had only just met, into such a perilous situation. You, though still seemingly asleep, opened her eyes slightly, a flicker of distress crossing her face. She recalled a memory of being embraced, a moment where she felt she was only thinking of herself. Suddenly, you thrashed, her hand glowing with a network of pulsating veins, a clear sign of the transformation's lingering effects. Nariko, startled, gripped her hand tightly, reassuring her that everything would be all right. Moments later, you slowly awoke, disoriented, as a man named Kuchi-san called out to her, asking if she was all right. She responded with a confused query, wondering who had arrived. He awoke with a jolt, not to the face of Kuchi-san, but to a terrifying vision. His own scream echoed as he struggled against a white sheet, his eyes wide with horror at the sight of a zombie with glowing eyes looming over him. He cried out, questioning if it was truly a zombie. The terrifying vision faded, replaced by the presence of a woman with long, blonde hair and dark roots. She asked if she could enter, then quickly apologized for having overslept. He looked up at her, still disoriented. Moments later, they walked side by side, her long hair flowing behind her as she indicated they should move a little further. They settled down, sitting close together on what appeared to be a bed or couch, their backs to the viewer. She turned to him, her expression concerned, and asked if his head hurt. He instinctively reached up to touch his head, still processing the situation. He confirmed that he felt no pain from the blow he had received. She then inquired if he had been bitten on the neck by Sunny-san, wondering aloud if he was invincible. As they sat, he finally recognized her, calling out, "Ah, Kane-san." He then reflected on the gravity of their situation, remarking that things felt truly dire once the initial shock wore off. She agreed, acknowledging the truth of his words. She leaned into him, expressing her gratitude for his help. He, however, seemed surprised by her thanks, quickly clarifying that it was Noriko-chan and Sunny-san who had truly come to their aid. His expression twisted into one of pure terror as the memory intensified, revealing the monstrous, roaring face of a mutated zombie, the true source of his earlier scream. As the chaos unfolded, Kane-san walked away from the indistinct, mutated figures, her thoughts turning inward. She reflected on her past, how she was constantly approached by men, and how she had dyed her hair to keep them at bay, lamenting that she had few female friends despite not being disliked by them. She reflected on her past, how people, even her own family, kept their distance. Yet, sometimes, when a man showed her a fleeting kindness, she would foolishly believe it was genuine, and that was always her downfall. She hated how easily she would fall for such gestures, a weakness she despised within herself. Her thoughts drifted to a particularly painful memory, a time she had believed, truly believed, that someone was kind, and had invited him into her home. The sound of frantic kicking and struggling echoed from a bed. The memory intensified. She was pinned down, her arm restrained, unable to move. She screamed loudly, desperately trying to alert anyone to her plight, as a menacing, shadowy figure loomed over her. She fought back, delivering a powerful kick to the man who had assaulted her, recalling his words about being seen. He retorted, accusing her of being seen crying, and threatened her, declaring he would kill her. She curled up, still consumed by terror. Even after only being struck once, the terror remained, a deep, lingering fear. He called her name, but his expression was cold and unfeeling. He continued his assault, holding her down, questioning if she was nothing more than a plaything, demanding to know what was wrong with her. Overwhelmed, she screamed in anguish, begging for someone to tell her what was right, declaring that this situation was not her fault. Suddenly, the scene shifted violently. The man who had been assaulting her was now being savagely attacked by a monstrous, gorilla-like beast, its jaws wide and bloodied. Within her mind, small, monkey-like figures desperately tried to suppress the screaming beast. A woman with long, light hair, her eyes welling with tears, pondered if it would have been better to be gently embraced. She questioned if the bug on the extension line of intimacy wouldn't count. A voice, perhaps her own internal struggle, lamented that Sunny-san was struggling, pleading for help. Another, more forceful thought, challenged her, asking if it was truly acceptable to support a girl troubled by something other than physical intimacy, calling such an idea insane. As her distress continued, a young man with dark hair, Yu, asked if she preferred Sunny-san, noting that they had just shared a kiss. She replied, her back still turned, that she was different. Turning further away from him, she offered a quiet apology, stating she had had enough and wished him good night. As she attempted to leave, he desperately called out, reaching for her arm to stop her from departing. Still on the bed, he pleaded with her not to leave with such a pained expression on her face. A moment of silence passed as he internally questioned if there was anything he could do to help her. Her face, now fully visible, was streaked with tears, her eyes wide with a profound, heartbreaking sadness. Seeing her anguish, he leaned in close, his expression filled with concern. Below, her legs remained on the bed, a silent testament to her lingering presence. He then pulled her into a tight embrace, offering what comfort he could. Their legs intertwined on the bed, a quiet moment of shared vulnerability settling between them. Yu and the woman with light hair shared a passionate kiss, their faces flushed with desire as their tongues intertwined. Their embrace deepened, her hand gently caressing his head, pulling him closer into the intimate moment. Moments later, they lay together in bed, her body positioned above his as their fervent kiss continued. They paused, lying side by side, gazing into each other's eyes. She softly called out his name, and he responded, admitting he felt a directness in his emotions now. Suddenly, Yu was overcome by an intense, painful sensation, a head-splitting arousal that left him distressed and his body rigid. This overwhelming feeling caused him to recoil, his face contorted in pain and confusion. The woman, equally distressed, tried to understand, asking if he was all right. Yu struggled with an internal conflict, debating whether to proceed, while she expressed her desire for him to wait, mentioning Kane-san and her own complex feelings about intimacy. Still distressed, Yu apologized, stating that today might be impossible. She looked disappointed but accepted his words, her expression softening. Later, they lay together in bed, fully clothed, with her embracing him gently from behind. She apologized, admitting she had been a little scared and felt as though she had completely invited him. Yu reassured her, saying it was fine. She lay beside Yu, sleeping soundly, while he, wide awake and distressed, worried about the consequences of their intimacy. He felt it was a mistake to sleep like this, fearing he would have a wet dream. Still in bed, Yu was visibly sweating and agitated, desperately wishing for morning to arrive quickly. The morning light revealed the cover woman, startled and embarrassed, trying to push Yu away as Kane-san peered in, asking if they had done it again. The cover woman insisted they hadn't, expressing that it was impossible in their current state. Kana-san then greeted Yu, who lay in bed looking utterly exhausted and defeated, muttering apologies and lamenting his inability to perform. Later, as the group gathered, Kana-san asked Yu if he was feeling better. He replied that he found it strange he was still alive, questioning if he had become a zombie. Yu expressed surprise that he hadn't been cured by the intimacy, noting that he still hadn't come. Noriko then realized that she had been in the same tent as them, implying she had overheard their activities. Kana-san recalled being told to return first and leave the area, wondering if the place they were in was dangerous. She then suggested they should all return. Overwhelmed by emotion, Kana-san broke down in tears, sobbing uncontrollably. The cover woman immediately embraced her, offering comfort, while Yu and Noriko watched, concerned. Still sobbing, Kana-san cried out, asking why she had thought she was going to die. The cover woman held her close, asking what she meant, as Yu and Noriko listened intently. Noriko then began to explain, recounting how Kuka-san had been chased by a group of zombies and had managed to escape into an elevator. However, they couldn't confirm if there were zombies on the other side of the door, so they had been trapped inside until the group arrived the previous day. She held the distraught woman close, who wept uncontrollably, pleading, "Please, don't do anything reckless. It's fine if I can't do anything. It's not so bad that I have to die." As she continued to embrace the crying woman, reassuring her, Yu watched them with a gentle smile, remarking that they should all live together. Moments later, her mood shifted as she playfully tugged at Yu's jacket, noting that their heights were similar and offering to lend it to him. He looked surprised, questioning why she would do such a thing. She leaned in conspiratorially, whispering if he preferred one over the other, or perhaps both, causing him to recoil in embarrassment and deny her implications. With a knowing smile, she then suggested that if he was going to leave this place soon, heading for Tokyo, he should give her some memories of his life. He averted his gaze, clearly uncomfortable. Elsewhere, she listened intently as Kana-san, now wearing a different top, appeared distressed, while another woman with short, light brown hair offered a quiet, "Thank you." Kana-san continued to look downcast, while the man in glasses stood observing Professor A, who sat with a contemplative expression. The woman with light brown hair, however, spoke with a determined smile, assuring them she wouldn't take anything, then asked Professor A if he understood anything after looking inside. He sharply retorted, demanding to know why she was looking at him while speaking. Undeterred, she explained her idea to Professor A, who listened thoughtfully, that she wanted to do some work with the help of the refugees. She described an image of setting up barricades with shelves and a bridge. She further elaborated, pointing to a rough sketch, that they could retrieve food from the back, but they would need to deal with the zombies near the stairs, a task she confidently stated she would handle. The man in glasses stood by, while Professor A sat, deep in thought, considering the audacious plan. He muttered about the recklessness of it all, while the man in glasses questioned if it was truly all right, fearing they would all die if they did nothing. The discussion continued as the man in glasses instructed cover woman to call Onodera-san. She agreed, but not without a condition, requesting that the food portions be distributed more equally among everyone. Meanwhile, Yu remained slumped and visibly distressed. His distress seemed to stem from the empty box he was now peering into, a realization dawning on him as he muttered in acknowledgement. The man in glasses, observing the survivors diligently moving materials to construct barricades, affirmed that he understood the situation completely. As the work continued, Noriko approached cover woman, asking if Shiratsuji-san had come this way. Cover woman replied that he had not, prompting Noriko to voice her concern about his whereabouts. Yu remained seated on the floor, seemingly oblivious to the new worry. Despite his earlier distress, he was now actively contributing to the defense, carefully boarding up a window. The man in glasses then approached Yu and Komagaya-kun, declaring that he would take over carrying the materials. Komagaya-kun, surprised, questioned his sudden involvement, but the man in glasses simply stated that they would finish the barricade work together. Yu attempted to object, but the man in glasses cut him off, insisting that it was fine and offering a curt apology. Yu, his eyes wide with a sudden realization, then asked the man in glasses if the food boxes were all empty. Cover woman explained that they had been forced to carry everything back and establish defenses, which meant no one could approach the food supply. She confirmed they had secured what they could. Leader woman then asked what their next course of action should be regarding the dwindling provisions. Professor A and the man in glasses discussed the growing discontent, with Professor A noting that Noriko-chan had joined a special group due to the dissatisfaction. The man in glasses lamented that those who were actively working received less food, highlighting the unfairness of the current distribution. Noriko, in a school uniform, clutched her hands, her face etched with regret. She reflected on her past, recalling how she had tried to be useful, but ultimately, she had also resorted to stealing. Her face contorted in anguish, she covered her mouth, tears welling in her eyes. She wondered if Yashishin would have forgiven her, if only he had been there. Meanwhile, in a dimly lit warehouse filled with stacked boxes, Kuchi-san and two other men observed Noriko from a distance. He knew he was not in a position to forgive her actions. He then recalled a past confrontation, where he had been accused of being a splendid teacher who had wrongly driven someone out. The accuser had challenged him, stating that a truly splendid teacher would never lay a hand on a student. Back in the present, the man in glasses, with a stern expression, instructed the scientist man to find Noriko, emphasizing that she was likely nearby and relied on him the most. The weight of sin hung heavy in the air. Kuchi-san, now walking with a determined stride, realized that any further delay would be too late. He considered the various types of people within their group, the Yankee, the freighter, and the chemist. He remembered Noriko's past contributions, how she had saved lives twice and was actively working to solve their critical food problem. He acknowledged that it was a continuous chain of events, but he had been saved by her actions. Later, Kuchi-san walked past Noriko, who stood shyly, her gaze lowered. He seemed to question if she was truly there. While she softly called out his name, Kuchi-san, he turned, surprised to see her, relieved that she had been found. He began to apologize for having driven her out, but then realized he had no time for apologies, as an urgent matter pressed upon him. He confronted a young schoolgirl, grabbing her arm as she recoiled in terror. She was overwhelmed by a horrifying realization. The virus could be transmitted through mucosal contact, turning people into zombies. He urgently demanded to know what she was doing. As he tried to intervene, desperate to do something for her, another man suddenly appeared, shouting at him to stop. The newcomer vehemently forbade any action, demanding to know what Kuchi-san thought he was doing. The schoolgirl, now on the ground, cried out in anguish as her right hand began to visibly mutate, covered in grotesque, prominent veins. She questioned in despair if this was already the final stage of her transformation. A man recoiled in horror as Noriko, a schoolgirl, reached out to him, her expression distressed, seemingly infected. His mind then drifted to a memory of them standing together on a train platform, and then to a small child, full of joy, running towards someone. Noriko, now visibly afflicted with a cloudy eye and lesions across her face, sat on the ground, extending her hand and professing her love, wishing she could still be of help despite her deteriorating state. The man looked down, overwhelmed, a fragmented thought echoing in his mind about an unknown infection and something that had been said. He recoiled further as a different infected woman, her eyes wide and spiraled, her skin mottled, screamed, demanding to know who her enemy was. Noriko stood nearby, her own face etched with distress. Noriko then turned and fled, running away from him, who desperately called out her name, questioning her destination. Meanwhile, in a different part of the city, a group of survivors worked to fortify a building. A large man, acting as their leader, instructed them to gather everything here, but to do so quietly. The young woman, a survivor with light brown hair, voiced her doubts to the leader, asking if their makeshift barricade would truly hold. He responded that if they were careful with noise and sight, it might suffice. She then reassured him, stating her intention to do her best so that others would not have to overexert themselves. She then apologized for causing trouble, acknowledging that their task would be much easier with 3 people like Sunny, but it was just her. A fleeting image of Noriko, smiling and wrapped in a towel, crossed her mind. Suddenly, she spotted Noriko in the distance and called out her name. 2 other survivors, a man and a woman, also noticed the figure, their expressions shifting to surprise and concern. Noriko stood alone between 2 houses, looking back, a sense of relief washing over her that she was safe. She stood before another girl, who reached out to her, warning her not to be alone. Noriko, however, seemed to be in distress, her head bowed. Meanwhile, the teacher who had witnessed Noriko's initial infection fled in terror, shouting that she had already turned into a zombie. Back at the school, Noriko suddenly lashed out, striking the girl who had approached her with immense force. The girl cried out in shock and pain. The blow sent her sprawling across the ground, leaving a trail of blood. Noriko, now fully consumed by the infection, turned and fled the scene, leaving the injured girl behind. The girl lay motionless on the ground, her body twisted, a dark stain spreading beneath her. Her eyes fluttered open to a horrifying sight. Several infected individuals, their faces contorted and skin discolored, stood over her, their vacant stares fixed upon her. One of the infected males peered through a broken window, his movements slow and deliberate, while the others continued to loom over the fallen girl. More infected began to gather, some breaking through the shattered window, their numbers growing as they converged on the building. Elsewhere, outside the school, Noriko stood, her eyes now completely vacant and spiraled, a clear sign of her full transformation. Inside, the survivors were in a state of panic. The girl who had been attacked by Noriko cried out in despair, lamenting that everyone would die. Another survivor, a woman, clung to a man, urging him to flee, while a third man ran in terror. The man, who appeared to be a leader, angrily retorted that they couldn't all die, reminding them that others were waiting outside to gather supplies. He then turned to the crying woman, asserting that no one had expected to die tomorrow, implying they all faced the same grim reality. The running man collapsed to the ground, overwhelmed. Amidst the panicked flight of countless individuals, a man in a suit, overwhelmed by the unfolding catastrophe, collapsed to his knees, despair etched across his face as he muttered that it was all over. Elsewhere, another survivor, his face contorted in shock and fear, watched the chaos unfold, calling out for Sunny-san, as he wondered what they should do. Meanwhile, 2 women confronted each other, one with dark hair angrily demanding to know why the other, a woman with long blonde hair, was simply standing there, urging her to do something. The blonde woman, her expression hardening, retorted that only she could help Sunny, and that the zombies outside might be different, perhaps even super perverts. In a separate room, a young woman with light brown hair sat on a bed, explaining to the blonde woman that the zombie virus remained in Kane's body, even after a vaccine. She elaborated that 3 others had received the vaccine early on, but it only temporarily activated an antibody reaction, causing their bodies to become zombie-like again. The dark-haired woman, having returned, grabbed the blonde woman, her voice sharp as she declared that this meant she needed to put on a condom, and demanded she produce it within 10 seconds. As the blonde woman shrieked in protest, the dark-haired woman forcefully pulled down her pants, accusing her of being the reason a vaccine was needed and demanding she produce it immediately. She was held down, her face contorted in distress as the timer above her head displayed 2 o'clock. The men around her, some with grotesque, ape-like features, seemed to be enjoying her predicament, one remarking that it felt too good to stop. Another, an older man, thought that if he didn't inject her now, he would be the one to suffer. Meanwhile, elsewhere, the teacher, who had previously fled, knelt in despair, questioning what had become of him. He lamented that he had not yet departed, while Nariko, tears streaming down her face, cried out, asking why he had become like this after promising to stay with them. Suddenly, a barricade of wooden planks shattered, revealing Survivor Girl 2, who had broken through. Back with the group, Sunny, now fully dressed and enraged, screamed at Survivor Male 1, demanding to know why he was just standing there. She declared that even if he was bitten, he wouldn't be cured, and that she would handle things. She then turned and walked away, carrying 2 large bags, followed by the rest of the group, including Leader 1, Survivor Female 1, Survivor Female 2, Survivor Female 3, Survivor Girl 1, Child 1, and Zombie Girl 1, all seemingly abandoning the situation. A new male survivor watched her go, surprised. As she moved, Sunny stumbled and collapsed to the ground, her body refusing to obey her will. She realized with a chilling certainty that she was not alone, and that this time, she would surely die. Infected hands reached out for her, their touch a prelude to her demise. Just as the infected closed in, Survivor Male 1 rushed forward, embracing Sunny and shouting her name, Sunny-san. His face was contorted in a desperate plea, even as one of the infected reached out, its decaying hand brushing against Sunny's sweater. With a fierce determination, Sunny unleashed a powerful kick, sending a grotesque zombie reeling backward. She continued her relentless assault, having already dispatched one of the infected, but more shambling figures closed in from all sides. The impact of her strike was brutal, twisting the zombie's body with a sickening crunch. As she fled, clutching a large, heavy bag, a wave of confusion and distress washed over her. She wondered what kind of answer she was truly seeking. A memory, or perhaps a haunting thought, surfaced, her past self, overwhelmed and crying, surrounded by grasping zombie hands, questioning what they had intended by trying to overpower her. Meanwhile, a new, formidable zombie, its skin cracked and hardened, strode purposefully through the desolate landscape. He pondered the nature of power, wondering if strength inevitably led to selfish desires. She unleashed her frustration on a nearby door, kicking it with immense force. Despite her overwhelming strength, she found no satisfaction in simply hitting things. With a look of utter disgust, she walked away from the fallen zombies, wiping her mouth as if to cleanse herself of the experience. She muttered about how sickening it all felt. Her expression hardened into one of fierce resolve as she declared she was far from calm and intended to move forward. She then questioned if being bitten and not dying truly made one invincible, thinking of someone named Yu. She recalled a moment from the past. A girl in a school uniform, Nariko, watched her walk away. Simultaneously, a sharp pain, a bite, and the subsequent clenching of her own fist, a memory of a wound. The memory continued, shifting to a different scene where the teacher, holding a broken pole, sternly warned Nariko not to proceed. She, with a bandaged face, clutched her own broken weapon, her gaze fixed. He, his expression a mix of determination and pain, reiterated his warning, stating firmly that they could not go in that direction. The scene abruptly shifted to the present, where a girl lay prone, seemingly unconscious or gravely ill, her internal thoughts a whirlwind of nausea and confusion, questioning if she was still alive. Behind her, a monstrous zombie face contorted in a silent scream. The immediate threat became terrifyingly clear as a horde of zombies swarmed. A male survivor desperately held the unconscious girl, while another female survivor was violently seized by one of the creatures. He shouted for them to escape, urging them to get out. The struggle intensified as the large, scarred zombie pulled the female survivor with immense force. The male survivor, still cradling the unconscious girl, desperately tried to pull her back, but she protested, insisting that he leave her and save Yukon instead. He continued to struggle against the powerful zombie, trying to shield the female survivor. Another woman watched in horror as the male survivor yelled at the creature to release Sunny. The female survivor, still caught in the zombie's grip, cried out that Yukon had told them to run. His efforts proved futile against the zombie's overwhelming strength. The monstrous creature easily flung the male survivor and the unconscious girl to the ground, scattering them amidst the other approaching zombies. The large zombie pinned the male survivor to the ground, his struggles weakening. The unconscious girl lay nearby, her eyes wide with distress. The female survivor watched, distraught, a terrible realization dawning on her. This was not how she was meant to save Yukon. The unconscious girl's distress culminated in a shocking revelation, as she cried out in despair, lamenting that Yukon was her only hope and that she might as well die. Sharp fangs became visible in her mouth. Still reeling from her own transformation, the young girl was held tightly by a male survivor as a horde of zombies pressed in. He desperately tried to reason with the encroaching undead, shouting that it was all a mistake, pleading with them not to be disappointed. The male survivor's face contorted in a desperate cry, his voice echoing the terror of the moment, while the young girl's eyes welled with tears, her expression a mixture of fear and despair as the relentless horde continued its advance. Elsewhere in the chaotic struggle, a blonde survivor, Sunny, unleashed a powerful kick, sending a zombie flying through the air. Nearby, the protagonist and the young girl watched in astonishment, the protagonist questioning if Sunny could truly throw things with such force. As the male survivor continued to shield the young girl, calling out to the protagonist, a massive zombie seized the protagonist, violently pulling her through a shattered window, threatening to drag her into the unknown outside. With a surge of strength, Sunny moved to block the relentless tide of the undead. She heaved a heavy cabinet, pushing it into place to barricade the doorway, declaring that they could not allow any more zombies to enter. After the immediate danger subsided, the protagonist held the young girl, now wearing a sweater. She noticed a bite mark on the girl's arm and considered administering first aid. The young girl, meanwhile, mentioned a strange tongue sensation, while in the background, Sunny subtly examined a bite mark on her own arm. Elsewhere, the male survivor listened intently as another female survivor explained a disturbing aspect of the infection. If bitten, one would enter a state of heat. He reacted with clear surprise to this revelation. The female survivor continued, confidently stating that she could likely resist reinfection for a while. The male survivor, still processing the information, questioned her, asking if she truly meant reinfection. Suddenly, a jarring memory surfaced. A young girl, Nariko, screamed in agony as a male figure, likely her teacher, violently broke a wooden sword over her head, the impact shattering the weapon. The memory continued, showing the teacher instructing a young child in kendo, telling her to properly use both hands. The child, practicing diligently, reflected on the person who had inspired her to take up kendo, believing that she would eventually forget them. She continued her kendo practice with intense focus, her form precise as she swung the bamboo sword. Her teacher, a man with dark hair, observed her from a distance, while Nariko, a girl in a school uniform, watched with a look of surprise, remarking on the sheer effort required to achieve such skill. He remarked that true skill was something the body remembered, a deep-seated knowledge that transcended conscious thought. Suddenly, the scene shifted violently to a zombified Nariko, her face grotesquely cracked and eyes vacant, screaming in agony. A broken kendo stick lay shattered on the ground nearby, a stark symbol of a failed defense. He, consumed by grief and rage, repeatedly struck the zombified Nariko with the kendo stick, screaming that it was all his fault and that he would put an end to it. He cursed his own hesitation, wishing he could strike with more murderous intent. However, a voice cut through the chaos. Survivor Girl 2, her expression urgent, shouted for the teacher to stop, pleading with him not to continue. She desperately held him back, tears streaming down her face, insisting that he listen to her and that Nariko could still be saved. Later, as the immediate confrontation subsided, Survivor Girl 2 stood firm, while protagonist Female 1 wept, her face hidden in her hands. The teacher walked away, defeated. Survivor Girl 2 then revealed that they had lied about saving Kyoka, stating that she had already turned into a zombie before they could reach her. Meanwhile, the distressed protagonist Female 1 was now shown zombified, sitting on the ground, her skin cracked and eyes spiraled. The teacher stood over her with a kendo stick, while Survivor Girl 2 was beside him. He lamented that she only needed a little rest, but it was too late. He cradled her, weeping, unable to bring himself to deliver the final blow. Survivor Girl 2, however, insisted that it was not merely about rest. There was a method, a way to cure her. She then declared with a fierce, determined expression that Yukoin would now have sex with Nariko-chan. His expression shifted, a look of deep concern giving way to stark surprise as he processed the implications of her words. He stared, wide-eyed and aghast, unable to comprehend the horrifying suggestion. "What did you say?" he stammered, the words barely escaping his lips, a chilling realization dawning upon him. The teacher, his face contorted in disbelief, demanded an explanation from the woman, questioning what she meant by sex with Nariko and how it could possibly relate to healing. She, however, maintained her resolute expression, confirming that the vaccine Yukoin possessed was indeed connected. He reached out to her, but she turned her head away, a look of deep distress on her face. Moments later, she was openly weeping, her body trembling uncontrollably as the teacher watched in horror, shouting in despair. He held her close as she slumped against him, her head bleeding from a severe impact. She explained that her left arm was now useless, and she could not get up, even with his attempts at first aid. Nearby, a fallen zombie lay motionless. As the teacher desperately pleaded with the injured woman to trust Yukoin and not give up, asking if she would help him, the protagonist, her shirt tearing from her expanding form, lunged forward, her body undergoing a terrifying transformation. The protagonist, now fully transformed with cracked skin and vacant eyes, was restrained by another girl who desperately warned that if she were touched and aroused, she would immediately be violated. The teacher stumbled backward in shock. The injured woman, still slumped and weakened, reflected that she, Sunny-san, had always been the one to help. The transformed protagonist, now on the ground, questioned her own worth, wondering if she was truly so clumsy and useless when left to her own devices. The other girl stood over her, observing. The injured woman, now topless and with a determined glint in her eyes, recalled how she had increased her contact surface by removing her clothes. She also remembered the ease with which she had restrained others, like Kane-san and Kyuka-san, in the past. She desperately held the transformed Nariko down, her own body pressed against the struggling girl. Nariko thrashed violently, her face contorted in a grotesque scream, veins visibly bulging beneath her skin. As Nariko continued to fight, her skin began to crack and peel, revealing more of the horrifying vascular network beneath. The protagonist gritted her teeth, struggling to maintain her grip, while the male survivor, Ko-chan, moved to assist, his expression grim. He quickly unbuckled his belt, preparing to use it as a restraint. The protagonist, still holding Nariko, urged him to hurry, realizing the urgency of their situation. Nariko's school uniform was now torn, exposing her transformed body. The male survivor, Kochan, later reflected on the disturbing events, his face etched with anguish. He questioned what he had been forced to witness, the experience clearly traumatizing him, while the teacher stood nearby, equally horrified. A profound sense of guilt weighed heavily on the protagonist as she sat beside Kochan. She recalled a conversation with Sunny and another survivor, who had spoken of the third night being crucial for the vaccine's success. Despite the ethical dilemma, she confessed her affection for Kochan, the light she had always admired, acknowledging that some things were simply beyond her control. Later, Kochan and the protagonist stood together, observing Nariko. She was now fully transformed, her eyes vacant and lifeless, her body wrapped in bandages, a chilling testament to the irreversible change. The protagonist's face was etched with despair, realizing the true cost of their desperate actions. She was tied, her school uniform skirt pulled up, revealing her legs marked with prominent veins. The male survivor, Kochan, asked if this was acceptable, then requested she continue listening to Sunny-san. He then asked if he should pull down his own pants, expressing that he couldn't stop himself. As she lay there, she urged Kochan not to hold back, asking if she was truly okay after being violated. He stared at her with wide, desperate eyes, asking if they should go together. Her face contorted in a mixture of pain and pleasure, her tongue lolling out, saliva dripping from her mouth as she thrashed, still bound. He stared, wide-eyed and trembling, as a voice called out to him, urging him to look at her. The words were distorted, almost a moan, yet insistent. He could only manage a choked, questioning sound in response. As he struggled to comprehend, Nariko lunged forward, pressing her lips against his in a forceful, desperate kiss. Her eyes were wide and unblinking, her expression a mix of hunger and something akin to a plea. Below them, the protagonist lay bound, her body now visibly marked with dark, prominent veins and blood staining her skin, a chilling testament to the escalating horror of her transformation. A young woman, Nariko, found herself in an intimate embrace with another woman, Hikari. Hikari saw Nariko as a delicate work of glass art, something not to be broken. Yet, Nariko harbored a deep dissatisfaction, feeling like a cheap imitation, yearning to be touched gently. As the embrace deepened, Nariko's thoughts raced, confessing her profound love and desire to be held tightly by Hikari, acknowledging that she was content as long as Hikari was near. The tender scene abruptly shifted to a more unsettling reality. Hikari now held Nariko in a tight, almost possessive grip, while a male survivor, bound and distressed, pleaded with Hikari to say the right answer. His face contorted in fear. Moments later, the male survivor, now free but still visibly shaken, extended an arm to shield Nariko, shouting for anyone to stay away as the ominous forms of the infected loomed behind him. Nariko, her eyes wide with alarm, explained that the knowledge she possessed was a problem, warning that if everyone knew, they would all be enraged. The male survivor, overwhelmed, declared his intention to leave the place immediately, before any hope they held was completely shattered. Meanwhile, Nariko stood with a determined expression, having made a choice, believing she had selected the right answer as a leader. She then demanded to be taken back, questioning who was responsible for the corruption unfolding before their very eyes, addressing the other woman as Hikari. In a desperate plea, the male survivor cried out Nariko's name, begging her not to go. He confessed his true love for her, revealing his fear of what had transpired and his unwillingness to see her embraced by that guy. Suddenly, the protagonist, her eyes wide and spiraled with an almost deranged ecstasy, let out a joyous cry, her face flushed and glistening, as if she had just achieved the right answer, with overwhelming success. A man, tears streaming down his face, desperately reached out to a young woman being carried away by another figure. He pleaded with Nariko to return, but a voice declared, "Today is a no-go." Still reeling from the traumatic scene, he remained frozen in despair. Nariko's voice, though unseen, instructed him not to touch her yet, as the full extent of her zombification remained uncertain. Despite the grim warning, a disturbing smile spread across his face as he agreed to a promise. Nariko, now standing before him with a suggestive gaze, vowed that when the time was right, they would truly become lovers. Moments later, he stood shirtless, looking down at Nariko, who lay prone on the ground, her body seemingly limp and exhausted. A wave of confusion washed over him as he stared blankly, questioning the reality of what he was witnessing. The scene abruptly shifted. He now wore a white shirt and jeans, supporting a distressed woman who looked up at him with wide, fearful eyes. Another woman, with long light hair, stood nearby, expressing concern. The distressed woman, surprised, recognized the light-haired woman as Kane-san. Still supporting her, he listened as she declared herself no good anymore. The light-haired woman, identified as Kane-san, held a bag of heavy potato chips, complaining of a sudden, intense hunger that made even opening the bag a struggle. Kane-san, now happily eating the chips, dismissed the idea of venturing outside, explaining that the zombies were loud and blocking the entrance. She then reiterated her preference to simply eat. She continued to munch contentedly, finding the chips delicious. In the background, the distressed woman offered her more, which Kane-san readily accepted with a cheerful yes, yes. A profound unease settled over the young woman, her brow furrowed with anxiety as she clutched a towel, beads of sweat tracing paths down her skin. Her expression suggested a deep internal struggle, a silent battle against unseen forces. Suddenly, the scene shifted, revealing Sunny-san in a state of shock and distress, her gaze fixed upon a gruesome sight. Bodies lay scattered across the ground, and she cried out, realizing that the teacher and Noriko-chan were among them, their fates now utterly unknown. Yet another jarring shift in reality or memory pulled the young woman into a different moment. She stood bare-chested, her eyes wide with a mixture of shock and confusion, as Sunny-san, with a seductive smile, offered her a bag of chips, urging her to take more. The unsettling vision faded, replaced by a desolate street littered with debris, where a faint, desperate plea for help echoed through the silence. The scene then returned to the grim reality of the scattered bodies, with Sunny-san still present, her expression one of profound despair as she surveyed the fallen forms of the teacher and Noriko-chan. A wider view revealed the full extent of the tragedy, with numerous bodies strewn across the ground, a silent testament to the chaos that had unfolded. As the chaos unfolded, a group of armed survivors arrived, their faces etched with concern and surprise. They had come to offer aid, but the sight before them was clearly more dire than anticipated. And then, the young woman's internal struggle intensified, her mind overwhelmed by a torrent of categorized desires and traits, a system she desperately wished to escape. She felt trapped, unable to break free from the relentless onslaught of these classifications. 5 days later, the bodies of the teacher and Noriko-chan, now lifeless and still, were seen being transported in the back of a pickup truck, their journey continuing even in death. A man in a military-style uniform and cap steps out of a truck, which has stopped on a bridge. Another figure remains inside the vehicle. The truck continues its journey across the bridge, carrying its cargo. A thought arises about the disposal of zombie corpses. The scene shifts to a tense confrontation. Sunny, arms crossed, demands to know if they truly feel bad for what they did, stating that their punishment is too light. Kumagaikuin bows deeply, acknowledging his fault, while Noriko looks on with a somber expression. Kumagaikuin then explains that in their current situation, expulsion is akin to murder, and if this happens, they will have a reason to kill. Noriko, in turn, states that she is also fundamentally against it, but cannot take responsibility for their expulsion. Sunny, still visibly annoyed, tells them to do as they please, but warns Kumagaikuin not to come apologizing to her, as she would never forgive such an act. He bows again, profusely apologizing. As Sunny turns away, Noriko gently places a hand on Kumagaikuin's shoulder, reminding him to properly confirm that the zombies are no longer moving. Sunny then adds that there is no guarantee they can be cured even if bitten, and she cannot imagine Kumagaikuin getting excited over a man's rear. Kumagaikuin, looking distressed, acknowledges her words, stating he still cannot believe it. Sunny, looking surprised, then notices Noriko and Kumagaikuin walking past a store. She wonders aloud, "Kumagai-sen?" as she sees them. Meanwhile, a bizarre theory about zombies being cured by sex crosses someone's mind. Noriko holds onto Kumagaikuin's arm as they walk, asking him where he is going. He replies that he is going to the restroom. She then asks if he called out to her when he was leaving, to which he confirms he did. As Noriko and Kumagaikuin walk closely together, Sunny observes them from a distance, a look of deep concern on her face. She wonders why they have suddenly become so close, even going to the restroom together. Kumagaikuin, noticing her gaze, asks if something is wrong. Kana expressed surprise, believing this was where she and Sakura would part ways, and questioned if Sakura truly intended to follow them. Sakura, looking apologetic, affirmed her commitment to protect you with all her might. As she spoke, Yu and Kana walked away together. Sakura found herself sitting on a bed, observing Yu as he slept soundly. She reflected on their current refuge, an empty house typically used for laundry, realizing she was free to rest as she pleased, having already made herself at home. A wave of relief washed over her as she acknowledged how truly terrified she had been. Later, as she brushed her teeth, Sakura's thoughts drifted. She pondered if her current circumstances were truly normal, especially considering Sunny-san's usual manner of speaking. She questioned if this was truly where she belonged. Meanwhile, Kana, now full of energy, stretched vigorously, declaring that her body was once again capable of movement. She then turned to Sakura, asking if she was fully awake and if her left arm, which now seemed to be moving freely, was alright. Sakura stood by Yu's bedside, watching him sleep. She considered the delicate matter she wished to discuss with Kana while he remained unaware, a topic she felt was too much to handle, hinting at something akin to intar. As Sakura ascended the stairs, she glanced back at Kana, questioning why she had bothered to follow her upstairs just to talk. Kana explained that the conversation concerned their upcoming journey to Tokyo. With her arms crossed, Sakura firmly told Kana that she was under no obligation to continue accompanying them from this point forward. Kana listened, her gaze cast downwards. Kana looked up, offering a quick apology before assuring Sakura that she understood completely. Despite Sakura's words, Kana, now seated on the bed, expressed her earnest desire for Sakura to join them on the trip. Sakura stood, her expression shifting to one of surprise. She reflected on her situation, realizing that if she were left alone, the possibility of failing to protect Yukuin was incredibly high. She also considered that it might be acceptable for her to be left behind, but the underlying reason for such a thought remained unclear. As she pondered, Kana, seated on a bed, inquired about her well-being, specifically asking if her left arm was still not fully recovered. Sakura reassured her, stating that it would eventually heal completely. Sakura, taken aback by Kana's surprisingly swift recovery, exclaimed that she had just received crucial new information. She then realized that since Kana had become a zombie, her healing power was many times faster than that of an ordinary person. Kana, with a knowing expression, then challenged Sakura, asking if she had ever witnessed a zombie naturally rot and die, implying that such an occurrence was unheard of. Her words were underscored by the sight of several infected individuals, some appearing injured but none showing signs of decay, reinforcing the grim reality that natural death was not to be expected from them. Their high natural healing ability meant that even if they were incapacitated, they would eventually rise again. Processing this unsettling revelation, Sakura cautiously inquired if it was truly safe to dispose of the bodies of the infected, expressing her concern. Kana, however, quickly reassured her, explaining that it was perfectly fine because she had been handling the disposal under proper supervision. Kana then clenched her fists, declaring her understanding and offering a playful thanks to Sakura, calling her a dummy. She then held up a small, skull-like object, revealing it to be part of the disposal process. Sakura watched, her expression a mix of deep thought and slight unease, as a person in the background wielded a large hammer, smashing something with a grunt of effort, presumably an infected individual. Sakura internally conceded that while she felt no sympathy, she could not simply abandon them. Moments later, Kana, now sitting comfortably on the bed, called out to someone named Sunny-san, while Sakura remained seated on the floor, looking down. Kana, with a wide, cheerful smile, then asked if there was something they needed to discuss, clarifying that from this point forward, she would be accompanying them, and there was no need for any formalities. She acknowledged the request to accompany them, confirming her understanding. She then enthusiastically declared her well-being, raising her left arm to demonstrate its full functionality, asserting that she was truly fine. Her cheerful demeanor quickly shifted to distress as she covered her face, calling out to Sunny-san, with a look of deep concern. Sakura, noticing Kana's sudden distress, leaned in and asked what was wrong, her expression worried. Kana, however, gently took Sakura's hands, asking her to listen carefully as she would explain everything slowly. Sakura, still holding Kana's hands, listened intently, her expression a mix of confusion and concern as Kana began to speak, urging her to hear her out completely, even if the sequence of events seemed strange. Kana recounted a past event, explaining that her mind had been preoccupied with Nariko-chan at the time, so much so that she had not noticed the zombie transformation happening right before her eyes. She recalled being thrown by Nariko-chan and nearly dying. Yukuin, listening, looked distraught, while the protagonist, also present, seemed to be processing this revelation. Sakura, her eyes wide with shock, questioned how she could have forgotten such a significant event, expressing disbelief that she hadn't noticed it. Kana, looking equally troubled, seemed to share her confusion. Kana continued, explaining that when she was searching for Kane-san, her mind was so consumed with the task that she and Yukuin had split up. Yukuin, running alongside her, appeared distressed by the memory. The narrative then shifted to a stark image. Yukuin lay motionless on the ground, blood splattered around him, a chilling game over message implying his demise. The voiceover lamented that such a crucial event, the separation from Yukuin, had completely slipped from memory. Back in the present, Sakura and the protagonist sat at a table, deep in thought. A small, blob-like creature, seemingly asleep, emitted soft scapi sounds. Sakura pondered if this situation was truly a good thing, her expression thoughtful. Sakura was left questioning her memories. She now found herself stressing over the need to keep her distance from Yukuin, fearing what might happen if she got too close to him again. This internal conflict was like a Newton's cradle, where multiple problems collided, making it impossible to process them all at once. The issues she had just considered were easily swept away by new, immediate concerns. Meanwhile, the protagonist confessed to Sakura that she felt deeply exhausted, not physically, but mentally, and that this exhaustion was strongly affecting her judgment. She worried that she would inevitably make another mistake. Sakura held her hands, listening intently. Elsewhere, Kana, still in bed, reflected on her own past. She remembered a time when she had to choose between Yukuin and someone else, and she had chosen Yukuin. The protagonist, still speaking with Sakura, expressed her desire for Kane-san to come, needing someone to pull her back when she made a wrong decision. Sakura agreed, stating she would go with Sunny-san. The protagonist then vehemently corrected her, emphasizing that she had made a mistake in her judgment. The protagonist, overwhelmed, hunched over, her face obscured by her hair, as she continued to express her distress, pleading for someone to stay with her until the very end. The world around them seemed to crumble, reflecting the protagonist's internal turmoil. For her, Yukuin's survival was more important than anything else in the world. In a vivid memory or vision, Kana carried Yukuin over her shoulder through a desolate, crumbling landscape, while Sakura looked up at her. Kana declared that if she ever had to choose between saving Kane-san or Yukuin, she would absolutely choose Yukuin without hesitation. The protagonist, still deeply distressed, covered her face, lamenting that she did not want Yukuin to know how terrible she truly was. Kana, standing nearby with Sakura, dismissed the protagonist's self-reproach as selfish, stating that she wanted Kane-san to come. The protagonist lay face down on her bed, her body racked with sobs. She thought to herself that she was not the kind of person who could lead others, and if saving someone meant abandoning her friends, she did not want to be known as such a person. She lay curled, tears streaming down her face, lamenting that she felt too weak and disappointed to embark on the journey. She did not want to go. Sakura, observing her distress, spoke of Sunny-san, and then questioned, "Yusa?" while Kana remained asleep on the bed. Sakura then turned her attention to Kana, who lay on the bed, explaining that she intended to head to Tokyo with Sunny-san and wished for Kana to accompany them. Kana, startled by the request, initially seemed hesitant, a blush rising to her cheeks as she recalled a past instance of helping Sunny-san, murmuring that something fell off. Elsewhere, a crowd of individuals bowed in unison, their faces obscured, one of them pleading for understanding, asking not to be disappointed. Amidst the distressed crowd, Sakura held the weeping protagonist close, her voice firm as she declared that the protagonist was the one who had been saved by Sunny-san, the one who was supposed to die. She questioned if the protagonist truly believed she could undertake Sunny-san's mission alone. Sakura then implored her, with urgency, not to consider herself dead, insisting that she must live. A profound realization dawned upon the protagonist, her eyes widening as a single tear escaped, a quiet, "I see," escaping her lips. Meanwhile, Kana wept openly, hands reaching out as if in a plea, acknowledging that she had to live, questioning if it was truly wrong to feel that way. Sakura, witnessing Kana's raw emotion, expressed surprise, remarking that she had not realized Kana possessed such an expressive face. Sakura continued, speaking to the still-crying protagonist, recounting her first encounter with Sunny-san after her own zombification, and how in that moment, she had desperately wished to live. She pondered if the success of the vaccine had been a mistake. Yu, standing nearby, then interjected, stating that the immense weight of such expectations was too much for him to bear alone. He declared that if his vaccine could save the world from zombification, he would willingly sacrifice his own life. Yu then turned to Kana, explaining that he believed Sunny-san was already at their limit, and the situation was far more profound than they could possibly imagine. Sakura helped the protagonist rise from a pile of debris, assuring her that it was acceptable to prioritize saving Yusa first, and then they would rush to assist her. Kana, reaching out, corrected them, stating that it was not just 2 people, but 3, implying she would join them. She lay face down, tears streaming, her voice barely a whisper as she affirmed her decision. "Yes, I will do it." Sakura sat beside her, gently stroking her hair, offering a quiet reassurance. "You absolutely will." Meanwhile, a door creaked open downstairs. Yu, peering into the room, wondered aloud if the others hadn't gone out, questioning what the 2 of them might be doing upstairs. Suddenly, Sakura appeared, her expression chilling as she lunged towards him, a sharp object glinting in her hand. "Your head. Shall I cut it off?" she hissed, as he recoiled in terror. Sakura asks Kana if she has calmed down. Kana, smiling, thanks her and assures her that she is fine now. They continue their conversation, with Sakura describing a scenario where they both fell from a cliff simultaneously and a bomb exploded between them, resulting in a game over. Kana quickly interjects, asserting that they are not mere monsters to be killed by a bomb. Sakura then recalls a past instance when you came to their aid, only to be struck in the head with a full swing. She laughs, finding the memory unbelievable. Kana's eyes widen in shock, realizing that this particular detail about Yu's head was unexpected even for Sunny, Sakura. She appears confused by the mention of his head. She calls out Yu's name, her concern evident. Kana, visibly agitated, asks if Yu's head is truly alright. Sakura attempts to calm her, reminding her that the incident occurred several days prior. Meanwhile, a woman with dark hair, a hairdresser, is meticulously cutting Yu's hair, which is covered by a protective cape. She asks if he wants his head cut, prompting Yu to respond with a distressed expression, mentioning that some people do indeed cut heads. The hairdresser suggests it would be better to cut his hair, as it has grown quite long. Yu, however, states that he does not particularly mind his hair length. Kana, overhearing the conversation, asks Sakura what that refers to, and Sakura acknowledges that the meaning of that can vary depending on the context. The hairdresser then informs Kana that she will be stepping out for a short while and asks her to look after Yu. Kana, with a determined smile, declares that she will resolve the food problem. He responded to her call for assistance, offering his help, though he questioned if he was truly the right person for the task. She apologized for the simple task of carrying luggage, while he, now burdened with a large pole and a bag, wondered aloud if this was truly a standoff operation as he had expected. Her expression hardened as she explained that the immediate need to guard against a group rampage was gone, for she had already thinned out a considerable number of zombies. Meanwhile, several hunched figures in hoodies shuffled towards the second-floor elevator. She stood before the elevator on the first floor, a faint glow emanating from her. As the hooded figures converged around her, their intentions clear. With a determined look, she clapped her hands together, preparing for the impending confrontation. The hooded figures, now revealed as grotesque zombies with glowing eyes and screaming mouths, lunged forward in a frenzied attack. She met their charge head-on, pushing them back with surprising force, her movements swift and precise. Using a sturdy pole, she held the surging mass of zombies at bay, preventing them from entering the elevator as its doors slowly began to close, trapping them inside. Later, the man reported to her that the second-floor elevator door was now blocked and its button broken, effectively sealing the zombies within. He then asked what their next course of action would be. She walked alongside him, a satisfied smile on her face, as he carried a bag filled with various blades and tools, remarking on how helpful it was to find so many useful items at the home center. The defeated zombie lay prone, its face contorted in a silent scream, as the new male ally walked away from the immediate danger, having neutralized the threat. Kana, observing the scene, commended his swift and decisive action, acknowledging the successful containment of the creature. She then urged him to hurry, reminding him that everyone was growing hungry. He, meanwhile, considered the implications of the zombie's state, thinking about how to properly dispose of it later. Kana, holding a newly acquired tool, then made a sly request, asking him to keep their methods a secret from the others. With the immediate threat handled, she confirmed their success in containing the zombies, a small victory in the larger struggle. The new male ally then addressed a small group of survivors, explaining that he had brought back what he could carry. He assured them that once the zombie remains were dealt with, they could safely retrieve the food inside. Meanwhile, among the gathered supplies, Sakura discovered a box of vegetables, exclaiming that they still looked edible. Kana and the hairdresser looked on, hopeful. Sakura, delighted, noted that the inside of the box was surprisingly cold, which had helped preserve the food. Kana agreed, but acknowledged that it was still only a partial solution to their ongoing food problem. The assembled survivors, a group of barely 40 people, had been struggling. Some had fled, others had been robbed, and they had been unable to prepare enough food to satisfy everyone. Among them, Sakura, overwhelmed by the sight of the food, broke down in tears. She expressed immense gratitude, explaining that the hunger had made everyone irritable, leading to arguments and an inability to even look each other in the eye. She listened intently as the man with glasses, Onodera, explained that they needed to process the perishable food items quickly before they spoiled. Kana, standing beside him, seemed to grasp the urgency of the situation. He then turned to Kana and the hairdresser, asking if they could take charge of the cooking. Kana, with a bright smile, eagerly confirmed that she would prepare everything immediately, while the hairdresser also appeared ready to assist. Moments later, the group sprang into action. Onodera began setting up tables, while Kana and the protagonist carried large pots of food. The hairdresser followed with a tray, and Sakura stood nearby, observing the preparations for the meal. As the preparations continued, Yu and Sakura encountered Kana, who had changed into a white lab coat over a striped sweater and dark skirt. Yu remarked that her hair looked much neater, to which she responded with a polite acknowledgement. He then noted that Kana had also changed her clothes, and Sakura added that her new look was a bit flashy. Yu, however, questioned if being flashy was truly acceptable in their current circumstances. As he spoke, Yu gestured, accidentally pulling at Sakura's plaid shirt, causing it to expose her bra. She gasped in shock and embarrassment, exclaiming that her innerwear was showing, while he quickly looked away, mortified. Kana, witnessing the scene, commented on Sakura's attire, noting that she too had changed. Sakura explained that she had received the new clothes in exchange for her torn sweater, adding that Kana's new look made her seem more like a high school girl from the chemistry club than a chemistry student. Kana, with a confident smile, then asked Sakura about her age, prompting a moment of silent contemplation from Sakura before she repeated the question, her expression unchanged. Meanwhile, the protagonist, now wearing an apron, stood ready with a bowl of food, while the hairdresser held a tray. They both smiled, announcing that the food was prepared and ready for everyone to come and get it. Kana, her hunger evident, excitedly pointed towards the waiting survivors, urging Yu and Sakura to join her in serving the food, as her stomach was rumbling. She continued to manage the food distribution, though Sakura expressed concern that Sunny-san's fuel efficiency was poor. Kana, holding a bowl, assured her that it was still moving well enough. As the distribution continued, Kana instructed the survivors that rice balls were limited to one per person, but there was plenty of pork soup. She urged them to be patient and only take one bowl for the day. Many survivors gathered, eating their portions. Kana, still in her lab coat, quickly devoured her own food, prompting Yu to remind her to savor it, as it was only one portion per person. Meanwhile, at the cooking station, the new male survivor, Kumagai-kun, approached the hairdresser, asking if he could also have some food. The hairdresser, busy with the pots, granted his request. He then looked down, a somber expression on his face, before declaring that if they were destined to die, they should not speak of it, but instead strive to live together. The hairdresser simply acknowledged his resolve. Later, the hairdresser advised Kumagai-kun to rest for the day, noting it was already the 6th day. A young schoolgirl, clinging to his arm, questioned his presence, wondering why he was still around. 3 days later, the schoolgirl, now full of energy, confronted Kumagai-kun, whom she called Kuchi-san. She exclaimed that ever since she woke up, she had been getting better and better, her hand moving on its own. She accused him and the others of dragging her into a game and using her as bait for sea monsters, demanding an explanation for her miraculous recovery and asserting that she was now at her peak. Despite her confusion, she declared her intention to help them. He listened to her outburst, a slight smile playing on his lips. He remarked that her recovery was good, but a formal apology offered in such a frenzied state would be meaningless. He also noted that Kuchi-san seemed faintly angry. Later that night, he looked out at a distant building, a thoughtful expression on his face, wondering if that was the place he saw. As he attempted to walk away, the schoolgirl pulled on his arm, making one last desperate plea. She begged him to reconsider tomorrow, reminding him that her life was almost over, but he had saved her, and therefore, he had to take responsibility. He enjoyed the meal, noting how happy everyone seemed. Kana, meanwhile, proudly declared she had eaten 3 bowls, while Sakura also ate with gusto, finding the food delicious. Suddenly, Sakura prostrated herself on the floor, apologizing profusely for the trouble she had caused. Kana, observing her, remarked that Sakura's face was now difficult to look at. Kana, however, dismissed the apology, telling Sakura not to worry. Sakura, still on the floor, confessed that she vaguely remembered trying to kill Sunny. Her memory flashed to a time when she was in a frenzied state, attempting to do something ambiguous for Sunny, making a terrible mistake. Kana calmly accepted Sakura's confession, stating that while Sakura was indeed in a state of confusion, Her intent had been to kill. The schoolgirl, overhearing this, reacted with shock and distress, exclaiming that it was merely a consequence of events. Kana, however, countered that they had successfully recovered food and sealed the zombies, so it was fine. Kana then asserted that the outcome was all that mattered, regardless of any strange detours taken. As long as everyone could smile, it was acceptable. Following her declaration, Kana bowed deeply to the new male survivor and Yu, repeatedly apologizing. Sakura watched, observing the scene. Yu then asked the new male survivor if he had made up with the teacher. The new male survivor responded that he had, but felt an immense sense of coercion. He then turned to the schoolgirl, declaring his intention to step down as leader. He explained that if something were to happen again, he would prioritize Nariko, and a leader who could not prioritize the group as a whole had lost their qualifications. He had just announced his resignation, and now, the young schoolgirl, Nariko, looked up at him with wide, tear-filled eyes, calling him Kochan. She clutched her hands together, her voice trembling as she declared that this time, she would protect him no matter what, refusing to let anyone take him away again. Turning to her, he inquired about her condition, specifically if there were any lingering after-effects from the infection or a risk of rezombification. She quickly reassured him that she was completely fine, having fully recovered. He then suggested that if she was truly well, then the matter of sex with Sensei should also be acceptable, leaving her visibly stunned. Meanwhile, in a separate conversation, Sakura sat beside him, her expression downcast. She spoke softly, questioning if what she had heard about Sunny-san was true, her voice tinged with concern. He continued to explain his perspective to Nariko, admitting that he had felt uneasy about the situation. However, he clarified that if it was a matter of protecting her, then his stance was different, implying a justification for his actions. Nariko then turned to Sunny, her face etched with desperation, and pleaded for her help. She begged Sunny to assist them in reconciling and overcoming the pervasive unease that had settled over them. Sunny reacted with a gasp of shock, questioning if she had been infected by the teacher. She quickly clarified that the infection was merely temporary and carried no lasting after-effects. Still, her expression remained one of distress as she repeated Sunny-san, seemingly grappling with the implications of Nariko's plea. Later, the new male survivor, Nariko, and Sakura stood together. He announced that if a meeting was truly necessary, it would have to be tonight, as they intended to depart early the next morning. Nariko's eyes widened in shock at the sudden declaration. As the night deepened, the group gathered, with the new male survivor holding Nariko's arm, while Sunny, Sakura, Yu, and Kana sat nearby. It became clear that the conversation regarding sex had been deliberately separated from the discussion about curing zombification, a distinction made to manage the complex situation. In the background, other survivors could be seen, preparing for the imminent departure.